There's renewable power all over the world. We now know how to make electrolyzers much cheaper, like 25% of the original cost. We know how to do that now. We don't have an excuse to get into it.
Does it need to be cheaper than oil and fossil fuel for it to be viable worldwide?
Well, right now it is. Okay, so let's just swallow that bit of financial data. Right now it is cheaper, and it's getting more cheap. It's the only fuel you know of which is declining in value.
You don't have enough of it, right, to power the world?
Yes. That's only because we haven't had policies to support it. If we had policies to support it 5-10 years ago, it would be everywhere. You'd see the global warming budget start to come down.
Yeah.
Now, we've got 5 or 10 years to make a huge difference. I need policy leaders all over the world to appreciate now, okay, big business is transacting with green hydrogen in multi-billion-dollar agreements. We now know it's here and it's here to stay. Let's spread it everywhere.
Coming up on the program, the hydrogen revolution. We'll speak with the CEO of Italian utility firm Snam about his new book and why he thinks green hydrogen will be competitive in just 5 years. Plus, how are airlines working to become more sustainable? We'll look at how Airbus plans to step up in the climate fight. This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lines, and this is Bloomberg Green. What will the world look like in 2050? Will global temperatures have stabilized, electric vehicles be abundant, and solar and wind power homes around the world? According to Marco Alvera, the CEO of Italian energy company Snam, that vision of the future could be a reality, and he says that hydrogen will pave its way. As he tells it in his new book, The Hydrogen Revolution, Alvera's moment of reckoning came in November 2018 when he tasked the Snam Scenarios team with studying how Europe could reduce its CO2 emissions to zero by 2050. Looking through the results of the study, Alvera said he was struck by how much hydrogen was in Europe's energy mix by that year. Beyond the abundance of hydrogen, the Snam model also predicted that it would be the cheapest form of decarbonized energy for many sectors, and that it could be cheaper than today's prices for oil, coal, and nuclear power. Our Maria Tadeo spoke with Alvera at COP26.
It's happening all very fast. We see the cost of hydrogen coming down a lot. Hydrogen will play a big role in the energy mix. I don't know if it's going to be 15 or 25% of a fully decarbonized energy system, but it's going to be big. Costs are coming down, and people are waking up to the fact that it's the only way to decarbonize certain sectors, the so-called hard-to-abate sectors.
And you say it's the only way and the costs are coming down. Where do you see prices moving? Because a lot of the reticence at times has to do with the pricing, that some argue, well, it's still not the cheapest option on the market.
So when I was first working in hydrogen in 2004, it was costing $1,000 per megawatt hour. 2010, $600. Today, $100, and we see it going down to $50 in 5 years' time, and to going down to $25 per megawatt hour in the next 10 years or so, which is a quarter of where it is today. That's really because renewable energy, and we're talking green hydrogen here, renewable energy costs are falling, but the cost of making the electrolyzer, which is the kit that you use to convert solar or wind energy and water into hydrogen, the cost of this kit is falling a lot because it doesn't really exist on an industrial scale. So as we build up capacity, we industrialize it, we standardize it, and we squeeze costs out. That's really the cost trajectory.
And for that, of course, you need demand, however, for governments and also institutions to kind of buy into this idea that it is the future and we want to invest and create the infrastructure. What are they telling you? When you speak to governments, when you speak to officials, are they keen on this?
They're very keen. So the Department of Energy shares our view in the States of getting to below $1 a kilo, which is $25 a megawatt hour. The European Union has a hydrogen strategy, which is very clear, and several member states have the same. Chile wants to export a lot of hydrogen. China's big on hydrogen. Australia's very big on hydrogen. Japan is blending already hydrogen. So I would say the world is now really focused on this because it's the only way to store energy for a long period of time economically is to convert it into either a liquid or a gas.
And of course, you talk about the price, but the other big component is the volume. You know, how big can you go? Where do you see that on a time scale?
So wherever it's sunny or windy, you can produce very cheap hydrogen eventually. And so compared to oil and gas, which are concentrated in few parts of the world, it's going to be very democratic from that point of view. So every sunny place, every desert, every ocean wind can be turned into hydrogen that we can put on ships, in pipes, and really start trading it around the world. So it's going to happen a lot faster than a lot of people think.
So, and when you say a lot faster, what is that in time?
As I said, $50, which is essentially oil parity within 5 years. And then, depending on how quickly we ramp it up after that, we could get to $25, which is coal parity before the end of the decade.
And in big scale.
In big scale, because once you get to coal parity, that's the only way we're going to get China and India to stop burning new coal. We have businesses in China and in India, and I see a lot of hydrogen development, a lot of renewable development in both countries. The India announcement was incredibly strong on 2030. Some people were upset about the 2017 net zero deadline, but when it comes to 30, he announced a big commitment to get to 50% renewables.
Were you surprised by it?
I was surprised that they would make it so explicit, and even the net zero is a big thing for them. And so I think it will happen faster than 2070 because of the falling cost of renewable and hydrogen. India's burning 80 gigawatt of oil, of diesel, to keep the lights on. So there's an immediate opportunity there, and we're very interested in working in that country.
And with regards to China, perhaps the fact that we haven't really seen them active, I guess the diplomats are working on this, but we haven't really seen the leadership.
It's going to be technology, it's going to be industry. I think China has committed to a net zero, which is very important. At the G20, China was clearly behind the 1.5 degrees. So I think a lot has been achieved between the G20 and COP, and I think what's really important is to see in the coming years how quick. It's in our hands to make part of this happen in 5 years, or it could otherwise happen in 15, 20 years. It's about building the project. The capital is there. We saw how many trillions of dollars are already committed. What's missing is really the projects, and that's where companies like us step in.
Marco Alvera, CEO of SNAM there, speaking with our Maria Tadeo. Let's turn now to the aviation industry. It's a big contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, and it's under pressure to change that. In October, the International Air Transport Association, a trade body representing airlines, approved a target of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. To achieve that, many airlines in the US and Europe are looking to buy sustainable aviation fuel made from renewable sources like used vegetable oil. Initiatives like these are pushing plane makers to come up with some radical new aircraft that will eventually cater to our growing appetite for travel without hurting the environment. We took a look at how Airbus, the world's #2 aircraft manufacturer, is stepping up to the challenge.
How long until we can fly emission-free? Airbus says it's more confident by the day it can be done by its 2035 target. Airbus's CEO spoke about its ambitions for hydrogen-powered planes at the company's summit in France.
The physics works. Hydrogen technologies are not new. They are used in other sectors. We use them in space on our rockets, and we don't need the laws of physics to change to be able to use hydrogen on our planes. So every day we become more confident, but we think we need to have a plane, we need to have the right fuels, the hydrogen available in the right quantity at the right place at the right time, and we need the regulations to be ready. So we really need the work and the collaboration of many people around the globe to make it happen on time.
But it could be a long wait until green passenger jets go mainstream. Larger aircraft with more than 150 seats are not expected to feature globally until about 2050. That means manufacturers and airlines today are under growing pressure to ramp up short-term innovations to cut their carbon. In the long term, meeting the ambitious plans for so-called green hydrogen means building a giant industry almost from scratch. To make that happen, British airline EasyJet is among those saying governments need to get involved and fast. Aviation's emissions over the last 3 decades leading up to the pandemic grew by about 80% to over 1 gigaton, and that's projected to double by 2050. According to Bloomberg NEF, about half of the airlines with the largest global market share have set net zero targets by that same date, nearly 3 decades away.
Coming up, from blue sky projects to the bottom line, we'll speak with our Bloomberg NEF expert Meredith Annex and dig into their models about how hydrogen fits into the future energy mix. This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lyons, and this is Bloomberg Green. Now let's bring in Meredith Annex, our Bloomberg NEF hydrogen specialist, to talk more about how hydrogen could change the energy landscape. So Meredith, what place do you think hydrogen is likely to have in the future energy mix globally?
Hydrogen's this incredible solution for us as we look to decarbonize because it's a perfect solution in areas that are hard to electrify. So where we like to think about hydrogen playing a role, it's in things like heavy industry, especially where you need a feedstock as well as energy source, and in things like dispatchable power, long-haul transport, maybe even shipping and aviation.
That sounds great that it can be used for such diverse industries. At the end of the day, though, how much is this going to cost?
Well, that's the amazing thing about hydrogen, because depending on how you make it, it can actually see significant cost declines in the future. So when we're talking about clean hydrogen, we usually mean green hydrogen produced from renewable electricity. And in that case, your hydrogen is almost as cheap as the renewables that are used to make it. So if you're in a place with really good renewable resources, you'll be able to have cheaper hydrogen. But even in places with less good resources, we think that hydrogen can be cheaper than $1 per kilogram, which is the price of unabated hydrogen today, and around $8 per million BTUs for those who prefer to think in energy units. And that can be achieved anywhere in the world by 2050, we believe.
All right, so let's talk about kind of the pros and cons list. I don't know where cost fits into that, but what are the advantages to hydrogen over other renewables, and then what are the drawbacks?
Yeah, main advantage is the fact that hydrogen can serve roles that electrons struggle with. And that's things like seasonal storage, for instance, or just anything where you need storability, where electrons are harder to store, hydrogen is going to be easier. That also leads to a downside, though, because hydrogen is less energy dense than the usual things that we use for storable energy today, like coal or oil or natural gas. So you will need more volume of storage to handle the same amount of energy.
Let's talk about the viability as well and how it may differ in different geographies. What is your view on that?
Yeah, so for green hydrogen, again, from renewable electricity, really places with the best renewable resources, things like Latin America or the Middle East, even Southern Europe, have really, really good potential for producing hydrogen. And then when you're looking at blue hydrogen, which is produced from natural gas or coal with carbon capture and storage, we do see that becoming more expensive than green hydrogen in the future, especially as renewable electricity costs come down. But that can be a viable option in places like the US Gulf Coast or Russia, where you've got good geological storage for the carbon, as well as ample natural gas that's quite cheap.
All right, great breakdown. Thank you so much to our Meredith Annex, our Bloomberg NEF hydrogen specialist. And of course, you can get more from the Bloomberg NEF team on the terminal and online. And they've recently done a podcast called Hydrogen 101 as part of its Switched On series. So from iron ore titans pivoting to cleaner energy to talk of a hydrogen revolution, that's it from this week's edition of Bloomberg Green. We'll be back next week with a deep dive into the state of electric vehicles. And you can keep the conversation going by following us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter @Climate. I'm Kaylee Lines from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and this is Bloomberg Green.
The great sci-fi art of the mid-20th century teased a vision of the future with one distinct element in common: a life for humans in outer space. Whether vacationing on an exotic new planet or commuting to the moon for business, space travel seemed like it was just around the corner. Yet here we are, a half century later, and only about 500 human beings have ever left the bounds of Earth's atmosphere. But thanks to a set of ambitious private companies betting on the promise of space tourism, that long-awaited future could be here sooner than we think. For most of the history of spaceflight, governments have been the prime force behind nearly every aspect, from planning to funding to crew selection. But as early as the 1980s, proposals for commercial space tourism began to emerge, along with innovative solutions for getting people there, such as the wild concept of sticking a 74-person passenger cabin in the cargo bay of a NASA space shuttle. Although various non-astronauts have been selected for missions over the years, true space tourism didn't happen until 2001, when an entrepreneur named Dennis Tito coughed up an estimated $20 million to hitch a ride with the Russian Federal Space Agency for a week-long vacation aboard the International Space Station. 20 years later, we're seeing a new contender in this final frontier of tourism: private companies.
It's becoming a private enterprise situation, still very high risk with a high reward, potential reward. But, you know, government is really out of the business of flying people now, and it's really going to be companies like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson that do that heavy lifting. Commercial space tourism is usually about taking the non-astronaut, the private citizen, into an orbital or suborbital flight. So you get a short amount of microgravity experience, and you can float and take some photos. And then you come back. This was something that technology had gotten to a point where the private sector was going to make a business out of this. There are multiple companies that want to get to the place where they fly people into space.
The first of these is Blue Origin, founded in 2000 by Jeff Bezos. Using the autonomous rocket system New Shepard, a tribute to the first American in space, Blue Origin plans to launch up to 6 passengers at a time, offering a rarefied treat of 62-mile-high views and a momentary experience of weightlessness. Booking officially kicked off in May 2021, with the very first seat to be auctioned off for charity. Meanwhile, Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic has also been pursuing a viable form of suborbital tourism, aiming for a launch in 2022 once Sir Richard himself has taken a flight.
I'm hoping to be able to go to space. I'd love to be able to coincide it with the moon landing and go to space. So I've got the whip on the team, and we'll see how we go.
The company claims to have lined up over 600 seat reservations so far, including Justin Bieber and Leonardo DiCaprio. Virgin has projected that the final cost of the ticket will be at least $250,000, or roughly $50,000 for each of the 5 minutes or so of weightlessness that you'll get to experience. Although costly, both companies' offerings aim to make suborbital flight a regular form of adventure travel, eventually driving down costs at scale to expand the customer base beyond the orbit of celebrities and billionaires. The third major contender is Elon Musk's SpaceX, which has set its sights even higher on orbital flights, which are
a whole nother level of complexity and energy and danger. When you go suborbital, if you're just going to go up above the von Karman line, which is 100 kilometers or about 62 miles, you only need to get up to maybe 5,000 miles an hour to get up there, and you go basically straight up and then straight back down. You don't have the reentry heating that you would see coming in from an orbital. So when you go orbital, I don't care if you're a baseball or a battleship, you've got to go 17,500 miles per hour, not just 5,000 miles an hour. The energies involved are much greater. By doing that, SpaceX has gone another level up, and that's what they're doing with the Inspiration 4.
Visit inspiration4.com for your chance to go to space.
Inspiration 4 is the first planned all-civilian mission into orbit, slated to launch in late 2021. The crew will bring their own set of diverse perspectives and backgrounds and experiences to test how a group of different people, namely people who aren't professional astronauts, could fare in space.
Until now, astronauts have had to be physically perfect, and this mission is changing that. And so I feel incredibly honored to be representing those who aren't physically perfect. At age 10, I was diagnosed with bone cancer, and I was treated at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And I spent a year there undergoing intense chemo and also surgery that ultimately saved my leg. I now work at St. Jude as a PA, a physician assistant, and I work with leukemia and lymphoma patients. The kids we work with are so brave, and they are very excited to watch me go to space because this is showing them that, they're capable of doing this as well.
Haley, along with 3 other crew members, will spend 3 days in space, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes before landing back off the coast of Florida.
Well, when you think about access, the first astronauts for the United States came from the test pilot side. And so women weren't allowed to be a part of that. We have somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s, somebody in their 40s, and somebody in their 50s. And so there can be access in all kinds of ways, whether you're talking about age, whether you're talking about gender, whether you're talking about race and ethnicity, and all of those things.
The first time, people are going up into space and not sent there by a superpower like the United States or Russia or China. Well, that's really significant. And you've got to be very thoughtful about it. The whole game plan right now is to make space really affordable and accessible for everybody, so that you can have fishing buddies going to space someday. But the first is special, and so with that, we wanted to have a crew selection process that could make space available to everyday people.
Getting to space is only the first step for space tourism. The next challenge is what to do and where to stay when you get there. Axiom Space is planning to launch the first segment of a new commercial space station in 2024. Their $2 billion project, called Ax Station, will become the first free-flying private international space station. Or, to use a more consumer-friendly term, a space hotel. Axiom isn't the only company out to make your space stay a little more comfortable. Bigelow Aerospace has been building what they call expandable habitat technology, like their B330, an inflatable pod module that expands once in orbit.
There's even one attached to the International Space Station right now they've been testing. And you take it up and it's rather small, and then you inflate it, and it seems to be working very, very well. This is likely to be the first kind of tourist hotel that you're going to see up in space. First of all, it's easier to carry instead of this giant tin can with all of that. The inflatables are lighter. You can just blow them up, and they get a nice big size for about less than half the weight probably.
But even as space missions become accessible to civilians,
the risks of going into space are incredibly high. And you could die 1,000 ways that we can think of and 1,000 other ways that we can't think of.
This is Michelle Hanlon. She's a space lawyer at the Mississippi School of Law, focused on protecting humans in outer space.
Now, I'm not an attorney for any of the space tourists, so I haven't been privy to their private contracts. But I can tell you that the FAA requires certain waivers to be in those contracts. So, for example, the FAA says, well, we're not going to make you make your spacecraft to a certain safety level. We are going to make you, spacecraft operator, make sure that you inform your space tourists of all of the hazards that you know of. I'd imagine a very long waiver, all the ways you can die in space. And you have to understand that there's health risks, and you have to indemnify the US government if you are launching from the United States. So those are things that we know a space tourist has to sign and has to waive. So now let's go back and think about our space flight participants. The FAA calls space tourists space flight participants. They don't call them astronauts. Why is that important? If you're not an astronaut, there's no obligation to rescue you if something goes wrong. It's a lot of money to set up a rescue launch. If it can even be done, it's something really important to think about, and that difference as we cross this threshold from having astronauts in space to having real people like me in space.
And when we are able to make it to space reliably enough, there's still a host of other legal and ethical issues to consider before space tourism can truly take off.
There are so many gaps in space law that we are going to have to put in a lot of sort of basement ideas. And so, for example, the Outer Space Treaty is a treaty that offers principles and guidelines for state activities, for the activities of national governments. It doesn't talk about private entities, it doesn't talk about humans in space. So now if something goes wrong, so let's think about all the times hotels on Earth are sued, right? So slip and falls, you step on something in the bathroom, you sue the hotel, and it becomes a private lawsuit. Because of the vagaries of international law, if something happens in space, well, boy, you can sue the state that launched your spacecraft, you can sue the company that brought you there, you can sue the hotel, you can sue the individual, you can sue every government related to that, because the way the Outer Space Treaty and the Outer Space Regime have set this up is that anything that happens in space first has to go through a diplomatic channel before you think about suing in a court of law. And so every single slip and fall in a space hotel is a diplomatic nightmare. And so we really need to figure that out before we start sending a lot of people there. You think about human rights in space. Here, we don't think about a human right to oxygen because it's kind of all around us and free. It's not in a space hotel. So what happens if something happens and the oxygen depletes? Who gets the oxygen first? And then, of course, let's not even think about the labor. How do you treat your labor in a space hotel where that person may be there for 2 or 3 years without coming back to Earth? So a lot of things to think about.
Space habitats are more likely in the near future to focus on research missions and be a home for experiments that can't happen as easily back on Earth.
Space hotels, I think they garner a lot of headlines and a lot of news, but at the same time, that's not the first thing that you're going to see happen. They don't offer the compelling business case, I think, that you'll see from a place that wants to manufacture pharmaceuticals or a new type of crystal or some type of filament or fiber optic cables and other things that you can do in microgravity. The things that are actually, a high value finished good, when you get that back to Earth and you sell it for a very, very huge profit margin, that's what's likely to happen in space, as opposed to having a real estate platform that you sell to a tourist. A space hotel is really interesting, and it will probably happen, but it's not likely to be at the forefront of space commerce.
Even if space hotels are right around the corner, don't get too excited about booking a trip in one.
It's not a cheap ticket to ride to space, and it's going to be, millionaires and billionaires and that sort. But at the same time, the point was made that in the early days of airline trips, that was also a completely unaffordable ticket for most people. Those people who flew were people of means, and over time it becomes affordable to the masses. And I think that's the goal for all the entrepreneurs in space as well, to get those costs down to a point where it's not $10 million or $5 million or $300,000 ride into suborbital space. When it becomes more like buying a first-class ticket to go to Europe from the United States. So that's the goal, and the question is, can we get to that point?
Given the immense operating costs of getting to space, it may be years, if ever, until space tourism becomes a profitable venture for any of these companies. Virgin Galactic, the only publicly traded company of the three, has had a particularly rocky year, initially riding on the momentum of a SPAC deal, but more recently beset by launch delays and major funders, including Branson himself, selling large quantities of their stock in the company.
Space is really, really, really hard, and it's an absolute cliche, but it's one that happens to be very true. It's just really hard to do. That's also the reason that you've seen the delays that, Virgin had talked about flying years and years ago. And it became such a crazy point that Richard Branson actually stopped talking about it when he was asked, because it was never going to be when he predicted. But it's not insurmountable. And, investors have stepped up because this is something that is doable.
Despite the astronomical dangers and costs of getting to space, it may ultimately follow the course of other once fanciful modes of travel.
Wright brothers having, what was by modern standards a very unimpressive first flight, at Kitty Hawk. I mean, you had like less than 20 years later, you had your first airborne ambulances being used to save lives. Fundamentally, the world is a more interesting place when people can go and dance among the stars and such.
The lure of space is innate. It's in our DNA. It's that exploration bug. We are an exploratory species, and we want to go out there and see what's out there.
That vision that I had in 1969 of seeing normal human beings travel into space, it's finally beginning to happen. When you get a bunch of people up there and they can all see it for themselves, that'll create even yet another revolution in how we treat our planet and the way we think about it.
So while 2001 came and went without quite looking like Stanley Kubrick's ultimate space fantasy, 2021 might finally be the year we're catching up.
If you visit California, you might be inclined to go to Disneyland, or jump in your convertible and take Highway 1 up the coast, or maybe make a pilgrimage to Yosemite. All very fine choices. But if you're the kind of person who revels in our planet's extremes, then it's Route 395 that you're after. This one glorious road will carry you from Death Valley's desert floor to sky-high views of Mount Whitney. You can see the 5,000-year-old bristlecone pines, the oldest living organisms. Or the bizarre tufa towers of Mono Lake. And true to California's boom and bust spirit, you can saunter around the ghost town of Bodie. What a novel experience to find an empty American city where all the businesses are shut down. To do 395 upright, it helps to have a guide, and mine is a man named Jan, and his crew, Heron,
Let's tidy up first.
and Lemmy, the hardest partying dog of all time. Jan agreed to show me some of what 395 has to offer, but only if we agreed not to disclose any locations.
My name is Jan Srostra. I'm an industrial designer out of LA, and I spend a lot of time camping and a lot of time in the Eastern Sierra. It's a place I love, and sometimes I'm known as 395 North because my Instagram account, and I don't like to be known as that, but I'm trying to use it to set a good example and do more with it than just social media.
Where did we end up camping? We got here late last night. I wasn't even sure where we are.
This is BLM land, right on the outskirts of National Forest, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. Basically, everything outdoors wrapped into one.
Yeah. Good thing about California, man.
Oh, man. We have so much national forest and public land that you can literally just cruise out and find a place to camp. It's ours.
What I wish was mine is Jan's sweet truck.
It's a 2019 Ford Ranger. Has about 200 watts of solar in it and a fridge, and has everything that an RV has except for a toilet, but just on a smaller, simple scale.
And you drive us around day to day in LA.
Yep.
And then just roll out when you want.
It's my daily driver. Handles great. And then when I'm done with work, I can just bail and go camping. So the camper basically has only what I need. Think of it as backpacking with a car.
Yeah.
The fridge has a couple compartments. This is just a kitchen box, stove, utensils, and a bunch of stuff. This one has just dry food. Then when you get inside, there's a bed. The bed flips up, so you've got tons of room in here. This awning is phenomenal. If you want to pull that over.
That's cool.
We just pop that up.
Sorted.
So, home on wheels.
Yeah.
This is my vacation house.
Dude, it's so nice, man. Even with his nomad lifestyle, Jan faces the same big question as the rest of us. Do the internet and smartphones have to ruin everything? When you find the super special, beautiful spots, is that you busting out a map and like looking where it might be cool to go, or is it word of mouth and just getting to know people, the locals? And
if I see a dirt road, I just want to go down it. So a lot of it's just aimless rambling. It's a desire to just see something. Check that out. For some reason, it's more fulfilling than getting a recommendation from somebody. Or there's tons of apps and websites now, road trip apps, camping apps. They've proliferated. The knowledge is accessible on the internet. I used to fight the geotags, and I would get really pissed off. Like, why are you posting this place? It's gonna blow up, it's gonna get trashed. Now I've realized that you can't fight it. The internet has just shrunk the world. So we're not gonna stop it. We're not gonna stop people from going there. So I'm a lot more focused in conversation now with trying to set a good example. When you go, pick up your trash. When you're pooping out in the wilderness, don't leave your toilet paper on the top. You know, make sure you follow, good steps for leaving no trace.
As a thank you for this quick guide to pooping etiquette, we made Jan, Heron, and Lemmy some tacos. And we all took in the night sky and knocked back a couple of drinks. Take that, Apocalypse. The thing about good times and serenity in 2020 is that they're fleeting at best. After we split up from Jan and continued on our way, smoke started to envelop us. The plus side was that our RV no longer smelled like feet. The downside was breathing. My man David here suggested that we try and outflank the smoke by cutting through Yosemite. Without a reservation, we had to talk our way in.
Yes, no stopping, no getting out, and yeah, no problem. We just wanted to get through.
It was a beautiful choice. Glad we got out of the smoke.
Whoa, okay.
But not quite as effective as we had hoped. Fast forward 4 hours or so, and we had managed to trade the smoky majesty of Yosemite for the smoky,
look at it,
strip malls of the Central Valley.
We have made it sort of out of the smoke, all the way across Yosemite National Park and here to the gorgeous Central Valley of California. We're off to see a kind of surprising tech startup that is making some pretty strange machines to serve all the growers out in this region. And we're here in this near Fresno. This is California farm country, right?
We're just south of Fresno, a town called Kingsburg. So we're right in the Central Valley of California. Very, very large farming Valley here. It's kind of considered the breadbasket of the world.
The Central Valley stretches out over about 20,000 square miles, and the farmers here produce about 1/4 of the food that Americans eat, including a whole lot of fruits and nuts.
Tell me a little bit of the background of Gus. I know some of this is like a family business. The roots of this go back a ways. Tell me kind of like how we got to what's essentially like a startup, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So the founder, and he started the business back in 1982. He started with is basically with his dad was commercial spraying of trees and vineyards. Got to the point where our biggest challenge was labor, just the shortage of it, really. He was forced into innovating, and he had this idea for quite some time about doing a driverless sprayer, and it finally got to the point where he said, you know what, I either got to get out of this business or I'm going to innovate.
Organic or not, crops need to be sprayed, and this process has to take place a few times a year. This means hiring a lot of people to work long hours under serious pressure. And so, just like the tech bros to the north, Gus decided to solve all of its problems with robots.
On this like labor point, you guys have set this up where you can have somebody in a truck and that one person can monitor, I think like 8 of these.
In order to operate Gus, you have one guy or girl that sits in a pickup and they monitor from a laptop computer. So that person is basically just watching all the vehicles on the screen. They can monitor up to 8 of them at a time while they're out there spraying in the orchard. And so that user interface really provides them with all the information they need to make sure that the machines are safe and that they're doing the correct job. So it tells them what speed they're driving, the engine RPM, the amount of gallonage per acre that they're applying at any given time. So if any one of the machines has an issue, it's going to send an alert to that laptop.
Much like a self-driving car, these beasts use GPS, LiDAR, and cameras to see and navigate the world around them. They also rely on pre-built maps of the orchards for extra guidance. Gus builds the machines right here, and then takes them out for robot training on this orchard next door. It's here that the company learns if the machines will behave and do as their software and human masters command.
So this is kind of like this is a test orchard where you guys put it through the paces and work on the technology?
Yeah, so this is our test orchard right here. It's right by our building, as you can see in the background. So every new machine, as it comes off the assembly line, it's put through a commissioning test right here. We test all the sensors on the machine, autonomous computer, all the safety systems, make sure it's doing what it's doing prior to when it's delivered to a customer.
So what's it doing now?
So right now he's doing a test spray. So he's just turning the water on to make sure that the system comes up to pressure, spraying water out of the nozzles just to make sure it's all functioning properly.
Okay. It's got like a crazy turbine at the back, or?
Yeah, so it's basically just a big fan.
Okay.
And that fan's driven off of the Cummins diesel motor, and it just basically creates a big airflow.
Gus is already selling these vehicles to brave modern farmers. And people the world over have taken notice of its machines.
And have you just sold them in the Central Valley or like throughout the U.S. or even overseas, or where are they going?
Yeah, so right now the majority of our machines are here in California in the Central Valley. However, we do have machines and customers in Florida, in the citrus industry over there, as well as Australia.
And I think you started selling them in like December of 2019?
Yeah, so we started taking orders early last year for the sprayers, and the first deliveries we made were in December of 2019.
Okay, so. And how much do they cost each?
So our retail price on these machines is $285,000.
So it's not a small investment, but I'm sure the regular sprayers aren't cheap.
Yeah,
either.
I mean, we're honestly not too far away from conventional equipment on our price, and the main thing is that the return on investment is very quick due to all the labor savings and the increased efficiency. I mean, these machines, they just thrive. But basically what we're doing, besides this machine, this is our first machine. We call it Orchard Gus, mainly designed for your nut trees, as well as citrus and fruit. In the future, we're working on a few other projects We're going to do more machines. One of them is actually a vineyard sprayer, so vineyards are much tighter spacing, so the machine has to be physically smaller. And then we've got our eyes on doing a lot of other innovating.
That right there, friends, is a Central Valley farmer putting his whole fruit basket on the table. Gary's TED Talk can't be far off. And with that, it was time to get back in the RV and to confront what happens when three men are bested by their own failings and the forces of entropy. Next on Hello World, we cruise into the Mojave Desert in search of a lunar lander.
We have instruments that we are going to deliver to the South Pole of the Moon in December of 2022. Instruments that are trying to scan the surface of the moon.
And hang with a test pilot who walked away from this.
Meet Betty. She lives by herself, but for the last few months, she hasn't been alone.
LQ, tell me a joke.
Did you hear about the claustrophobic astronaut?
No.
Apparently, he just needed a little space.
Most technology isn't made for 93-year-olds. But this woman is making sure that this particular robot is.
LQ, who are you?
She's researching the way we interact with machines. And if she has her way, robots will soon be a trusty companion for all of us.
My name is LQ. How can I help you?
As technology replaces old jobs, it's also creating new ones. I'm Aki Ito, and I'm here to show you the jobs of the future.
My name is Danielle Ishak, and I am a human-robot interaction researcher. It's really hard to intuitively design a robot meant for a consumer audience. You have to make sure that it's a robot that people want, people know how to use, and people value.
Danielle works for an Israeli startup called Intuition Robotics. Its U.S. office is here in downtown San Francisco.
Hello.
Hey Danielle, it's Aki.
Come on in.
The company is funded by a couple big names like Samsung and Toyota. Full disclosure, Bloomberg's venture capital arm is an investor too.
This is LEQ.
Can I take her out for a spin?
Please.
LEQ, tell me what you can do.
I am a proactive social robot designed for older adults. I can connect you to your family and friends, and even play music.
These features might remind you of the Amazon Echo, but you'd be missing the point if you compared her to a smart speaker. She's not meant to just be useful. She's meant to be a companion.
Why don't you take a break and have a drink?
And that's why she has a head that can nod and make other subtle gestures you might expect from a pet.
Through our research with older adults, we're finding that almost on a daily basis, we see that somebody tells her that they love her.
Really?
Or that they like her. Or that they miss
Literally,
her.
I love you?
Mm-hmm. They'll also tell her, I'm depressed, or I'm lonely. They'll open up to her in a way that they might not necessarily open up to a human because they don't feel like they'll be judged.
LEQ isn't on sale yet. but a prototype is already in the homes of about a dozen early testers who live in the Bay Area.
LQ, tell me what the weather is today.
Danielle's job is to figure out what's working and what's not.
Sorry, please rephrase your request.
And she does that by visiting each of her testers twice a month.
How important are these visits to your job?
They're critical. We're building a product for people who we are not. I'm not a senior, and how could you know how to design for somebody if you don't do research? Because otherwise, you would just be designing in the dark.
Jobs like Danielle's are just starting to emerge. Until recently, robots were mostly in factories, separated from humans. But now, they're finally getting cheap enough, small enough, and smart enough to be in our homes. This has created a whole new challenge of designing robots that people will actually want to interact with. And that's where Danielle comes in. Her research has helped shape every little facet of LEQ, from the way LEQ moves to the way she talks.
It's a very special job, and it can be really hard, and it can be really frustrating, but at the end of the day, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think the most rewarding part about it is when I see the joy on the users' faces, like that they saw their feedback turned into something real.
Today, we've driven east of San Francisco to go see one of Danielle's research participants.
LQ, tell me something interesting.
Did you know that Ronald Reagan was a lifeguard in high school and saved 77 people's lives?
Now, see, this is where a conversation is. She should open up and I should say, no, I did not know that. I expect her to be able to continue a conversation for at least a couple of comments.
Yeah. And why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because that's companionship.
When Betty was around Danielle's age, she was working with some of history's very first computers.
When I was finishing up my master's degree, I was working at Harvard in the computer lab when they were building Mark IV. A large room-sized computer. But now, this artificial intelligence stuff is amazing. LQ?
Yes?
Schedule a doctor's appointment.
No problem. I'm working on it.
When Danielle brought along the idea of working with robotics for the elderly, I said, are you kidding me? Will older people connect to a robot? And she said, I don't know, let's research and find out.
Danielle grew up here in this suburb of Atlanta. Her parents spent much of their childhoods in Israel and met in the US.
We as immigrants, we understood that we might need to work a little harder. In fact, I feel that rather than taken away from Danielle, it gave her so much more, because she understood the fact that you need to run after your dreams and work really hard, no matter what the challenges are.
School didn't come easily for Danielle.
I have dyslexia, and that very much affected my self-esteem academically.
The principal of the school did not recommend her to take advanced classes. She fought for it, and she got into it, and she did very well with them, too.
Danielle's first job out of grad school was at X, the secretive research facility founded by Google. It's known for dreaming up all kinds of wacky, far-flung ideas.
Can you tell us about the moonshots you worked on?
No, I can't tell you too much about the projects that I worked on. I can say that I was working on robotics.
She loved the job, but wanted to work on something that would reach real consumers sooner. So she left X after a year and joined Intuition Robotics. working in the field for 4 years now, and it took her a while to find her footing in a male-dominated industry.
I've gone to different meetups where there'll be like a circle of men with their like zip-up jacket with their like company logo on it and a beer in their hand. And I'll come in with lipstick and nobody wants to talk to me. This is my closet.
So at first she did her best to fit in, wearing a pair of glasses she didn't need and toning down her style.
So what's the kind of thing you used to wear to a conference?
Stuff like this, blousy things that make you look like you're 40.
But that got old after a while.
And what's the kind of thing you wear now?
Now it's like I just enjoy being kind of expressive and playful in what I wear.
Before we wrap up for the day, Danielle has one more LEQ tester to visit. Joseph is 97. And he's had the robot in his home for 8 months.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. How has Miss LEQ been?
She always tells me to take a drink of water at least 4 times a day.
So, we added a whole bunch of new facts to LEQ.
Did you know that a cup of chopped red bell pepper contains more vitamin C than an orange?
Okay. What did you think of that?
Certainly, the print was, I could see that quite clearly.
What about this?
I can see that. LEQ, play music.
No problem. It will begin shortly.
By 2050, almost 500 million people are going to be 80 or older. And if current trends continue, more and more are going to be like Joseph and Betty, living alone.
LEQ, stop.
Today, both of them are doing okay. But some of Danielle's other participants have been struggling.
Is it kind of hard to leave them at the end of the day?
It is. Some of our testers are pretty advanced in the stages of depression through loneliness and isolation. And at times, I know that LEQ is cheering them up in their day, but I know that it's only part of the way. No source of artificial intelligence robots will ever be able to replace humans and human companionship or human care.
The key to Danielle's work is to embrace that very limitation of machines.
Robots should help humans do what they love, help humans interact with more humans, help humans in general. Not pull humans away from humans, not take humans' jobs and leave humans without purpose.
Whether it's in our workplaces or in our homes, robots are soon going to be everywhere. And it's up to Danielle to make sure this robot-filled future leaves us just a little better off.
So don't be afraid. And if you are afraid, come and join us, because I promise it's a friendly place.
Times are tough. Jobs are scarce. It's risky to be outside and around others. Seems like there's very few ways to make extra money during a pandemic. So I guess I'll just hunker down and binge social media until this all blows over. Wait, don't these people make money? How do these people make money? Streamers, YouTubers, Twitch stars. How do they make money? Is it a lot? Is it a lot of work? I know, I gotta ask somebody in the biz, and I got just the guy. Austin John Plays.
This is your full-time job now, right?
As of November of last year, yes. This was always just kind of like a side thing. Like any money that I made from doing my videos and whatever else, I never touched that because I didn't really think of that as being like real money. And then it started coming in more and more. And then it was like I hit my first day that I broke $1,000 and I was like, this is actually going to be money.
How did the YouTube channel come to be?
When the game Pokemon Sun and Moon came out for the 3DS, there was like things that I learned about the game, and then I wanted to just share that information with people. And at the time, I didn't have any way to capture a screen or anything, so I found like generic footage, and I kind of put it all together with so much editing. And that video got 6 views. And then 2 days later, I made another one, and that one got 12 views. And then I just started pumping out more and more content, and people were like, this guy knows what he's talking about. It really just started building on top of itself, and then it was like, my channel really focuses on tips and tricks. So I play a straight 18 hours, and I'll finish the game or get to about the 40-hour mark, and then I'll make my first video. While I'm going through, I have a giant notepad and just scribbles everywhere, and I make these notes of like the things that stumped me, so I know the things that may stump other people.
What do you need to think about if you're building your YouTube channel? 1,
You need to do something that you're passionate about. Not that you like, not that you think you're gonna make money on, something you're passionate about. The other thing is something that other people are passionate about. It holds a special place to them. And third is, it needs to be something that people are gonna seek out information on. In order to enter into the marketplace, you either need to be better than everyone else, you either need to be faster than everyone else, or you need to be more accessible than everyone else. And you can't be more accessible because it's already on the platform. Granted, if you understand how the algorithm works, which is very similar to Google Analytics, then yeah, you can have a little bit of a head start. But if you're not doing it faster, and if you're not doing it better than everyone else, then why should anyone watch your channel? So my income as a YouTuber kind of breaks down to 3 different ways. 1, which is the bulk of it, which is ad revenue. Whenever you go and you watch a video and then there's an ad and then you wait 5 seconds and you hit the bottom right corner and then you go on to the next video, or a non-skippable ad, or the video starts immediately, you get the little banner ad at the bottom, or if you scroll down from the video, the first thing that shows there is an ad. Those are the 4 different types of ads that can appear on every single YouTube video. And all of them pay a certain amount. It varies on lots of things, like the country of the person who posts it, the country of the person who watches it, the time of year, where you are in the quarter, if there's anything going on with a reduction in ad revenue. Like, great example, COVID-19, companies weren't spending as much on advertising. So because of that, CPM went down. CPM stands for click per thousand. I'm using the Roman numeral for 1,000. And that means that for every 1,000 views, you get a certain amount of money. Now, on low ads, when I first started off, my CPM was 30 cents. So every 1,000 views, I made 30 cents. But then once I signed with an MCN and I started making more quality content and more engaging content, some of my better videos and certain times of the year, I can see CPMs as high as $12 to $14. And there's a big fluctuation between, you know, if I post a video when there's no ads being spent, like January and February, that's the reason a lot of your favorite YouTubers and also TV shows don't post new videos in that time of year because ad rates are down. Why are they going to make content then? Instead, you're recording and you're bulking up for when ad revenue is higher. The second way that a YouTuber makes income is support, crowdfunding, things like that. When I first started off, Patreon was really the only option, but then they started rolling out supporters and members for YouTube channels. So Whenever I have a live stream, you can click a button and then you can become a member, and then you get special icons next to your name. I believe they're called badges. Or on any video, you can hit the join button, and that helps support the channel. And then the third aspect of that would be merch. And for me, my merch has been somewhat basic. In fact, I'm wearing one of my t-shirts from last year right now. You have to endure the times that your first video gets 6 views, that you post it on Reddit and they say, shut up, and then an auto mod bans you. You have to go through that, because until you go through that and you discover why you're doing it, you're not doing it for other people, you're doing it for yourself. If you're not loving what you do, then it's not worth it.
Huh. So make a channel about something that I'm passionate about. Oh, sweet. I guess I can make the channel about that. Now, how do I grow an audience? How do I get popular?
It's all about diversification, right? You have to have a massive Twitter following. You have to have a massive Instagram following. You have to have a massive YouTube following. Of course, you have to be on Twitch, which is the key platform. But basically, any way you can get in front of your audience, you can engage with your audience, is going to drive those clicks, which ultimately drives the advertiser revenue that you get back from all of these platforms.
It's me and Dan playing video games and talking in a funny manner over them.
They're not just people who are good at games, they're actually people who are good at online engagement, online entertainment, first and foremost.
You have the right to remain stylish. Anything you wear can and will be used against you in the court of fashion.
The streamer is either very, very talented at the game. The best player in the game is generally going to draw a crowd because people like watching people who are very good. On the other hand, they're either very, very good or funny, charismatic, whatever it is on that side.
Oh, no.
You know, it becomes more of a show where they talk about other things outside of the gaming world, and gaming becomes really just a backdrop and an excuse to engage with that audience.
There were those weird, like, Ronald McDonald, like, straight to VHS movies. You remember those?
I'm personable, I'm chatty. I would kind of, when boring things were happening in the game, I would ramble on about, movies I'd watched or books I'd read and, or conversations I'd had and stuff like that. And so I think being personable was a big part of that.
It's not just getting on and playing games. It's getting on and being an entertainer. You are putting on a show.
All right, now let me go ahead and grab the samurai sword that every gym has. Okay, he's dead.
To have a larger audience and to have that audience, I think, you have to find your niche. You have to find what works and what connects with the audience and what makes them laugh and what makes them keep coming back.
You gotta make it a little more exciting, all right? Throw in a hanging bishop. Have everybody in suspense for a moment.
I think the real most important thing is to just get used to being on camera. Like in any sort of performance thing, is get used to talking on camera. My first few videos were terrible, but because I sat down and did it for 6 to 8 hours a day, I just got used to talking and I got over that uncomfortable hump.
If you go into Twitch purely with the expectation that you're going to make money, make a job out of it, have all this growth, and it's going to be great, you're probably going to burn out prior to getting to that point because there's very little payoff for a long time, right? Like multiple years generally before you really start to see a payoff. And so, those first few times you're streaming, nobody is there. One person shows up every 30 minutes, says hi, maybe, and leaves, right? Like, it's very discouraging, I think, for a lot of people. And so you have to be there just loving it. You have to love talking to yourself when nobody is around. You have to love just the game that you're playing, all of that stuff, because it takes a while. And I think a majority of people burn out prior to getting to the profitable point of it.
And there you have it. My very own YouTube, Twitch, Discord, and streaming channels all ready to go live. It's a veritable social media ecosystem just on the verge of thriving. So, don't forget to smash like and subscribe, and visit my Patreon for perks. Also, go to my merch page. And one last thing, stay cool, my friends.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
I'm John Tucker along with Jess Madden. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. And this is Bloomberg Business Week. We got to say, we're substituting today.
We are. We're Carol and Tim. I'm sure everybody's
Which one are
wondering.
you?
I think I might be Tim.
Yeah, I'm Carol, which is a little uncomfortable.
I'll do
for
my
me.
best to play
I know.
Tim today.
I can't play up to Carol. Anyway, great show for you today. Of course, as we were just talking to Joe in Washington, the NASDAQ 100, which I'm going to say is more sensitive to the rate environment,
Yeah.
up over 20% since the December low, and that does meet the definition of a bull market. We'll have the full wrap-up of stocks as we count down to the closing bell today.
It's when you think about coming into this year, and like you're talking about, underneath the hood for the S&P 500, information technology up more than 20%, communication services up close to 20% as well, and discretionary up more than 15%. So this was last year's laggards, now this year's leaders.
What is it? It's almost biblical. Those
Right.
that were last shall be first. Yes.
I know, what does that mean moving forward? But obviously, this has to, give investors a lot of people just came in this year, kind of thinking maybe potential doom and gloom for the first quarter. That didn't happen, and so this is really interesting. And obviously, seeing those more defensive corners of the market being the ones that lagged this quarter.
And I'm going to say we have a great lineup. You know what? Because we do. Mike McKee, our international economics and policy correspondent, he can't even fit that on his business card here at Bloomberg. He's going to tell us about his interview with Boston Fed President Susan Collins.
It's going to be great. And then also we have so many great interviews throughout today. Also, Andy Purdy of Huawei, the chief security officer, he's going to break down what they got in their latest security reports. That's going to be important. Also,
He's going to hate me because I have some difficult questions for him, being
So
a Chinese company. So.
we're going to wrap things up toward the end about an interesting Bloomberg story about a boozy boom coming.
S&P 500, 38 points higher. You are listening to Bloomberg.
Countdown to the close. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage ahead of the U.S. market close starts right now.
This is the countdown to the close. We've got 60 minutes left in the trading session, in the trading week, and in the first quarter. I'm Scarlett Fu here with Katie Greifeld, and we are joined right now by our colleagues Jess Menton and John Tucker. And in doing so, welcome everyone to our full platform, TV, radio, YouTube, originals. Am I missing anyone, Katie? I think
that's it.
I think we got it. All right. It has been a doozy of a month, but we're finishing with gains on a high note, and we've been pretty solidly in the green, a very broad advance this entire trading day, Jess.
That's definitely true, Scarlett. And coming into this year, who would have thought the NASDAQ 100, it's on track for its best quarter since 2020 and also on track for its second best over the past decade. So really seeing those growth and tech rebound. But what's also interesting, especially with the banking stress we've seen over the past couple of weeks, there's something I wanted to highlight. So looking at the KRE, the ETF that tracks tracks regional banks in the S&P 500. It is on pace for its worst quarter since 2020, but if you look at its low that it made about a week ago, it's up more than 5% since then. So you're seeing a bit of a rebound there as well, John. So I know you're taking a close look at things as well.
I got to tell you, I was lied to. I was told I had to wear a tie for this. It's coming off. It's Friday. Anyway.
You look great. It looks really sharp.
It's choking me. I was really curious. Anything related to Donald Trump, of course, on this historic day, you get indicted. Yeah, that's bad, right? Well, Digital World Acquisition, the ticker symbol DWAC, the SPAC that's merging with Trump Media, that was over 5% in today's trading. So the idea is supporters are going to be, glued to the former president's media company. And Trump, of course, is expected to be arraigned as early as Tuesday after this historic indictment.
Interesting that it's up 9.7%. We should mention, of course, that economic data was the catalyst for today's gains. It was certainly a step in the right direction. Core PCE showing inflation cooled in February by more than expected. And as a result, you have gains across the board. The NASDAQ leading the way and the Russell 2000 also doing better as well. It had been lagging for a bit there earlier this week.
And if we look under the hood, I have a lot of good news when it comes to the sectors as well. You have 11 of 11 sectors in the green right now. Leading gains is consumer discretionary. That, of course, is a lot of Tesla having a good day. That sector up 2.3%. Communication services and real estate also joining in on the rally there. Your relative underperformer is utilities, still up 0.4%. But the fact that you see utilities at the bottom there just speaks to what a risk-on day this is.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a look at Tesla because it's been at the top of the list for most active stocks by value, up by more than 6% before it announces first quarter deliveries sometime next month, maybe as soon as this weekend. The thinking is that price cuts probably helped volume sales. Micron, though, falling 3.5%. I really had to look around for some decliners here. With China taking aim at the chip maker, it's conducting a review of imports of Micron memory chips. Really, this is an escalation of Sino-U.S. tensions. And Micron, by the way, counts on China for just over 1/10 of its sales. And Schwab extending its declines, rounding off a 34% plunge this month. A lot of concerns over its funding costs, as with a lot of other financials. And Generac, this is the generator company, falling on a B of A downgrade to the equivalent of sell. B of A saying that the company's ambitious guidance looks out of reach as pressures mount in the residential generators market because of a worsening macro backdrop. Which brings me down to, or back to, the overall discussion on interest rates, because it all boils down to higher rates, doesn't it? Banks are losing out to money market funds that offer higher rates than banks. Assets in money market funds, as you can see at the end of the chart there, have been climbing, and they're now above $5 trillion to a record $5.2 trillion because savers are shifting their cash out of traditional bank deposits. Clearly, this was already happening at the start of the year, but then it just went off on a tear. It went parabolic, that's the word I'm looking for, right? Yeah, it went parabolic over the last few weeks following the collapse of SVB and the other banks. In fact, if you quantify it, more than $300 billion was added in the 3 weeks that ended Wednesday. Pretty incredible, Jess.
Definitely. And of course, we couldn't end the week or close to that without hearing from some more Fed speak, and especially an exclusive interview. So this was with Fed President Susan Collins here on Bloomberg Television earlier today. And she did welcome that lower reading when we got the PCE inflation data, but she did stress also that inflation remains too high. Here's what else she had to say.
I had expected early in March that I might think we would need to do more work, and the banking stresses and what I think is at least a possible response of banks in terms of their own liquidity needs has influenced that. And so it's certainly one of the important things to factor. I continue to see, given the resilience in our economy, that there's a pathway that we can bring inflation down without a significant downturn.
So guys, we have yet another Fed speaker who has been stressing and reasserting that they're not going to cut rates at the Federal Reserve. But if you look at what's happening with Fed fund futures, still in the back half of the year, they're pricing in cuts.
That's the interesting thing. You have this tension brewing once again between the markets and the Fed, but she made a really interesting comment there about the idea that they can get inflation down without having to tip the economy into a recession. That is one of the most enduring questions of the past year.
And someone else has just weighed in from the Fed. This is the influential New York Fed President, John Williams. He's talking about inflation, and the headline number here that I'm paying attention to is that John Williams expects inflation to fall to around 3.25% in 2023. He doesn't say by when. He just says he expect inflation to fall to around 3.25%. We also don't know what measure of inflation he's looking at because there's several measures: PCE core, CPI, any of those. Whatever the case is, right now we're not anywhere close to that level, and we're still well above the 2% goal. And he's made that point as well. Inflation has moderated, but is still well above the 2% goal. He generally says that the bank turmoil will likely lead to tighter credit. And Katie, that is the big issue here, right? How do you quantify, or how do you begin to quantify the tightening lending standards that banks will likely employ in the months to come, and what that will mean for inflation and economic growth?
And I can't take my eyes off this chart. NDX, go back to the December lows right now. It is up over 23%, and that fits my definition of, well, I won't even say it, but you know what it is.
Well, in any case, I mean, you think about the last time we saw a quarter like this. It was in 2020, of course, when the Fed was throwing the kitchen sink at the economy, at markets, pumping liquidity in. That is not the case now. We have a Fed that's been very clear. We have more work to do. But guys, we got to leave it here for now. But we're going to be back together again live on TV, radio, YouTube, and Originals in just an hour at 4 p.m. for our Beyond the Bell coverage, where we take you through today's market close. And just a reminder, of course, that Bloomberg Business Week is now on Bloomberg Originals.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm John Tucker, along with Jess Menton in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Radio Business Week edition, Jess.
I mean, it's going to be a great show. I'm really excited about our next
It already
guest.
is a great show because I get to do this with you.
Thank you. I feel the same way. And I am really excited to speak with Bloomberg's Michael McKee, Bloomberg News' international economics correspondent, on his interview with Boston Fed President Susan Collins, who we were just speaking about. And basically, obviously, there's so much to unpack, right? We did get the PCE data earlier this morning, but obviously everybody wants to know, what is the Fed going to do?
Oh, we also got University of Michigan, because Mike is the one who sat me down and said, listen, dummy, this is important, and it's the inflation expectations part of it, but we'll get to that.
Right. Exactly. So with that, let's bring in Michael McKee, who's going to speak with us about his interview with Boston Fed President Susan Collins. So Michael, break this down for us as far as kind of what was your big takeaway from what she said with you earlier today?
Well, I guess it would be steady as she goes, steady as the Fed goes. They have always said they're going to raise rates to a restrictive level, which at the last meeting they defined as about 5.1% on an effective basis, and then they were going to leave them there for the rest of the year, and that's what Susan Collins said she would vote for today. She is looking at the inflation numbers, and she was pleased that they came down from the month of January, but she said that's not enough because they're still more than twice the level of the Fed's target. So if you're in the markets and you're betting on 4 rate cuts this year, she says you're probably doing it wrong.
Are they all preaching from the same hymn sheet? Everybody on the same page there at the Fed?
Yeah, they pretty much are, John. They're all singing the same old spiritual, rates are going to stay higher for longer, that we've heard them singing for quite some time. The feeling is they need to get rates up, and the cumulative effects will take time to get into the economy because you don't buy a car or a house every day, and businesses don't make investment decisions every day. So it takes about 9 months to 18 months to get into the economy. So we should be just about there, Susan Collins said. We should start to feel it pretty soon. And that's what they're looking for, is enough restraint in the economy to slow it down, to slow down demand and bring down inflation.
So, Mike, why do you think we still see a divergence when we're looking at what Fed fund futures are pointing at versus obviously what the Fed has stressed as far as what is coming with its campaign, and potentially, obviously, they've made it clear they're not going to cut rates this year?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we haven't had a situation like this in a very long time. Probably part of it has to do with Fed credibility and the markets testing the Fed to see if they will follow through on what they said they're going to do. And part of it may be that some people in the markets think we're going to see recession sooner rather than later, that the Fed's combined interest rate increases will hit the economy harder than the Fed thinks, and they will have to cut rates to bring the economy back up again.
What's the history of all this? I mean, you sort of made reference to the long and variable lags with which the Federal Reserve policy works. When it turns, does it turn really quick? Does it turn on a dime? Should I strap in?
You probably should strap in because, in a way, it does. There are some sayings, some economists have said, this takes a long time to develop, but when it happens quickly. And so we could see in 1 month, I'm not predicting which month, but in 1 month, maybe all the numbers start to really go south, and we'll see it pile on top of each other. Because if you start to see consumers pull back, and then companies start laying people off, then consumers pull back even more, and you get this sort of non-virtuous cycle, vicious cycle. And so that's something to keep an eye on. But the Fed, and Susan Collins today said they still see a path to getting there without sending the economy into recession.
Mike, something you and I have talked a lot about is looking past the last 8 hiking cycles and typically how the Fed doesn't stop until you're looking at where inflation is compared to where the terminal rate is. And I know so many of us, we always talk about CPI, but when we're looking at PCE, it looks like it's right in line where obviously the terminal rate is at this point. Do you think that could potentially mean the Fed would have room, since it's its preferred gauge for inflation, to potentially pause in May?
Well, they could potentially pause in May. They've said they want to go a little bit above. They want to be a little bit restrictive, which, given the fact that we're at 5% now on the PCE, 5.1% would do that. And then they could pause. And then they've sort of done the historical, gotten the Fed funds rate above the inflation rate, and that tends to bring inflation down. So that's what they're looking to do. And as President Collins said today, if the data continue to show up as they have in recent weeks, then it is probably going to be another rate increase in May, and then they would go on hold.
The 2% target, is that written in stone?
Well, it's like the sword in the stone. There is a kid out there who can pull it out of the stone, but it isn't going to be anybody we know right now. Their view is if they change the 2% target, then the markets will start thinking, well, what is the real target? Maybe they make it 3, but then does that mean they could go to 4? And you lose the market discipline. So they do a review of their policies every 5 years. So in 2025, what we may see is the Fed saying we are going to adjust the target if they feel that that is worth doing. But for right now, they're going to stick to the idea that they need to get down to 2%.
What's the next big data points on your radar that we need to be focusing on?
Well, of course, next week's is the jobs report on Friday. That's going to be the biggest. We get a lot of data. It's the first
Good Friday,
week of the month. Right? Good Friday, yeah. It'll be good for those who have the day off. For those of us who have to be in at work, it's just an okay Friday. But we get ISM, both the services and the manufacturing numbers ahead of time. And so we'll get a sense of how the economy is doing, and then get the idea of get some information on how the labor market is doing, which is the part that concerns the Fed.
Do the troubles in the bank, I don't know, what are we calling it, turmoil or crisis in the banking industry? How much of a rate hike did that account for?
Well, that's an open question, and there is a kind of a debate. There have been all kinds of estimates, from 0.3% to maybe 1.5%, and all of them were couched in the phrase, depending on how long it lasts. Well, we've ordered the T-shirts that say, I survived the big bank crisis of mid-March 2023. It seems to be kind of settling out.
Did Susan Collins say it was all clear on that front? What did she say about that?
She didn't say it's all clear, but it does look better. Now the Fed will be moving on to the what went wrong phase. But if we don't see a significant continuing of this volatility in banks, then it's likely it won't have as much of an effect as people are forecasting, because a lot of banks had already tightened lending standards. The last loan officer survey for the month of January showed that 43% of banks had tightened their lending standards because the economy was expected to slow down. So do they go much further, or are they already essentially there?
You brought up the senior loan officer survey, and I know a lot of people are going to be focusing on, once we get that data for the first quarter, will we be able to see it before the next Fed meeting in early May?
Well, you will not be able to. No, I can't either. Generally, they're released. They're done for the month of January and then the month of April. They do them quarterly, and they get released on the first Monday of the next month. So that would suggest May 7th would be the release date, and the Fed is meeting on May 3rd. But they will have all the data, as Susan Collins said. We will know what the banks are doing, so they'll have a good idea of what's going on. Whether they want to release it early or not to the public, we don't know.
This is an unfair question because it's equity related. How much of the increase in stocks that we, particularly the NASDAQ, is related to the anticipation on the part of investors that we're going to see rate cuts later this year? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not a...
But you play one on
strategist.
TV.
I don't even play one on TV, nor did I stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So I have no credentials for giving you advice. But what we have seen is that the tech sector does better in a low interest rate environment. And if the markets are thinking the Fed is going to cut, then that could explain some of the movement in tech. But you also have a lot of cross currents going on. All this stuff with AI right now, everybody's suddenly discovering tech again. So it's hard to say for sure.
What about when it comes to the balance sheets? It's basically been moving in the other direction. Could that be interpreted as more in a way of easing?
No, because it's a different mechanism. Now, this last week, the balance sheet started to go the other direction again because discount window loans went down. But basically what you had is banks keep a certain amount of their assets in reserve in case people come to the bank and say, please give me my money. And they had put in a number of these banks their extra reserves into treasuries to earn some more money. Then rates went up, the prices went down for those bonds, and they couldn't get as much for them. But when they lend them to the Fed, the cash they get is going to go into reserves in order to be able to satisfy any demand for cash. They aren't going to be lending it out. So it's not going to be easing like QE.
Mike, thanks. Good to see you. Mike's wearing a tie on radio.
I love it.
I'm taking mine
bright
off.
Yellow.
This is ridiculous. It's Friday. Anyway, Mike McKee, the economic data, and his interview with the Boston Fed President Susan Collins. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. We check markets all day long here on Bloomberg. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ are all advancing. We have got just about 38 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell, and the Dow is now positive for the year. Moments ago, we had the Dow up 356, a gain of 1.1%, now showing a gain for 2023 as we wrap up the quarter of 0.2%. Right now, the Dow higher by 1.1%. Equities extending this week's rally after a key measure of inflation cooled last month by more than expected. S&P at 4,100 as I speak, up 49 points, a gain of 1.2%. NASDAQ right now up 185, higher by 1.5%. 10-year yield 3.48%. Spot gold down $10 the ounce to $19.69, a drop there of 0.5%. West Texas Intermediate crude up by 1.4%. Well, as for the market outlook, Victoria Fernandez, Chief Market Strategist at Crossmark Global Investments, says the outlook is blurry.
And I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get a very clear picture until after May. If the Fed says at the May meeting that they're done hiking rates or that they're at a pause, then I think you get a little more risk on and you can write that story a little bit better.
Norfolk Southern is being sued by the Justice Department over the train crash and chemical spill that forced the temporary evacuation of a small Ohio town in February. Norfolk Southern up 1.4%. And a federal appeals court has ruled that billionaire Elon Musk must delete his 2018 Twitter post suggesting that Tesla workers could lose their stock options if they formed a union, as it violated labor law. Tesla up by 6%. Recapping, stocks are rallying, the Dow positive for the year, S&P up 1.2%. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks, Charlie. So this is Jess Mitten back with John Tucker, and we have in our interactive broker studio June Grasso, Bloomberg News legal analyst and host of Bloomberg Law here. And we're also going to bring in our star equities reporter, Bailey Lipschultz. He's here in, actually he's in Zoom in New Jersey.
I was going to say, where is he? He's not here.
He's always here, though, so it's fine. He's
I don't think so, Bailey.
Us. He's our star reporter.
Give him grief. He's working from home.
Hey, it's okay. And we're going to talk about the next legal steps in the criminal case against former President Donald Trump. Also, how these Trump leaks facts that you were talking about, John, earlier, have been reacting to this. So, June, I'm going to start off with you. Can you set the scene to just run down what's happened and what is ahead for this as far as when we're going into next week?
So, do you have a half hour?
So many pieces to unpack, right?
I actually do.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's good. So, the main thing is that we don't know what the charges are because it's under seal. So we won't find out what the charges actually are, perhaps until the arraignment itself happens on Tuesday. So, but what we suspect and what's been reported, as John Tucker knows, is that it's supposed to be a falsifying business records charge, which is a misdemeanor. And in order to take that up to a felony, the prosecutors will have to prove that Trump falsified records to cover up a second crime, such as violating federal campaign finance law. So that's what we suspect it is. That's a novel kind of theory. New York prosecutors have never tried that before. And as far as the arraignment, which comes next, is that he's going to be here downtown at
This is New York Criminal Court. If you've ever been to arraignments, and I've been to any, not me, but watching others being arraigned, it's like it's an assistant district attorney who's like 25 years old, and they power through it. Like your arraignment, if you're just a typical Joe or Joan, takes about 20 seconds.
So
I
this
suspect it's
probably
going to
will
be different.
Yeah,
Okay.
especially if they read the 30-count, what CNN's reporting is a 30-count indictment. It will be longer. And I don't know for sure, but I think it might not be the 25-year-old assistant,
Oh, you think
first
Bragg's
week
gonna
on the
do it,
job.
or-
No, I don't know that
He's
Bragg
the-
is going to do it, but I think maybe one of the attorneys that's been working on this case might do it. So just for, so we might actually get a shot of Donald Trump in the hallway. They sometimes allow cameras in the hallway. So if he's walked into the courtroom through the hallway, we might actually see him.
That'll be the perp walk that we usually
Yeah,
get.
I don't think he'll be in handcuffs unless he wants to be. He has said, there's been talk apparently about him wanting
He's
to
a showman.
have a perp walk with handcuffs on. But so he'll be booked in the DA's office. He'll be fingerprinted. The mugshot will be taken. Maybe a DNA swab. I'm not sure about that. And we won't see those mugshots most likely unless some news organization says we need to see them under First Amendment grounds for some reason. I don't know what. So that's what will happen. And then the charges will be read and he'll plead not guilty and he'll get to go home to Florida.
Okay, with your background, and I have to point out to everybody, we are talking to a Harvard Law School graduate who's got extensive experience. Is this case flimsy?
I can't say.
I mean, having seen the
I can't say
charges.
because I haven't seen the charges.
I knew you were gonna say
everyone
that.
is waiting. Every lawyer is waiting to see what the charges are, once that indictment is unsealed, to see if maybe there's more there than we thought. But let me just say this. I don't think that Alvin Bragg, who's a cautious kind of man, would indict a former president if he didn't think he could prove
Wait a
his
second.
case
I remember
beyond a
talking
reasonable
to
doubt.
the chief judge of New York, Saul Walkler, and he told me in New York you can indict a ham sandwich.
Yes, but this is
and
not
then
a
he was
ham
indicted
sandwich.
A few years later.
No, but this is not a ham sandwich that we're indicting. This is a former president, and you don't want to indict him just because you can indict him. And so, and also look at what he went through with the grand jury. I mean, he called witness after witness. He called witnesses for the defense to the grand jury. Then he called rebuttal witnesses. So, I mean, I think there might be more there.
Let's bring in Bailey to get the take
Yes,
on
please.
what's happening with these SPACs that have been linked to Donald Trump. What's happening today? How have they been performing?
Yeah, right now we have Digital World, which is the SPAC working to take Trump Media Group public. He's up about 8%, so trading around $14. Remember, SPACs typically go public around $10. This one has a little bit more than $10 per share in cash value, so still trading at a 30% premium, 30% and change premium to what it would be worth if this deal fell apart. Really is just a gauge or a proxy of how much news is around Trump and how much excitement could be around it. So you see Digital World trading higher. You see Rumble, which is the conservative alternative to YouTube, actually reported earnings and was up double digits. Funware as a penny stock that's tied to Trump, also rallying, but still really down sharply over the past year. So those are the big three proxies that pretty much get a bid, whether it's good news or bad news or really any news as it relates to the former president. We typically see these stocks really move in tandem.
So what's the idea? Is everybody's going to be watching these outlets? I don't even know what to call them because 24 hours, 7 days a week now.
That's the view. Trump Media owns Truth Social, so kind of his ripoff of Twitter, which is where he typically posts. So we've seen engagement, pretty strong numbers relatively from there. So that's kind of part of the optimism is that if Trump is making headlines and if you are a follower or just interested in what he's doing, you're going to be spending more time on Truth Social, maybe going on to Rumble to hear Russell Brand or some other commentators who have been booted or banned from various platforms kind of laying out their expectations. Rumble's a company that really wants to be uncancelable is the way they phrase it. So those are kind of areas that at least the perception is that if you're not wanting to listen to Bloomberg Radio or other traditional media outlets, that's where you'll kind of go for your entertainment engagement sounding boards.
And Bailey, you cover all things SPACs. What's next for this Trump-tied SPAC moving forward?
They've been working to get this deal done. This was a deal announced back in October 2021. They've really done everything they can to get extensions. So right now, their drop dead date is in September. So that means they can continue to work on getting the sign off from the likes of the Justice Department, the SEC, who have been helping hold up this deal. So all eyes are on what could move forward. One thing that's interesting to note, though, a few weeks ago, their CEO actually was booted from his role, Patrick Orlando, who had brought public public a handful of SPACs and was really a big fan of Donald Trump. So the shaking up at Digital World with their new CEO, Eric Swider, stepping into that role could be a cause for optimism that this deal will eventually get done. But I talked to a lot of people in the SPAC industry, and they still really see this as something that probably does not actually cross the finish line, which would mean investors who bought it at $14 today or $175 back in October 2021 will be left with about $10.35.
This is unfair because I haven't seen the financials of any of these companies. I mean, are they really viable?
There's a lot of the beauty and curse of SPACs is that we don't really know much about what Trump Media wants to be or what it plans to be. Rumble valuation is really the big thing that analysts are kind of skittish of, but they have seen an ability to court some of these call them talent or influencers to their platform. So I think that Rumble, it seems like, at least looking at the fundamentals, could serve as a alternative video platform, but there's a lot of gray area around the valuation of Trump Media and actually what it would look like and whether it could ever turn a profit.
And June, before you go, since you're still billing us, what are your billable hours anyway?
For
when
you,
is
you're
the
an
arraignment?
influencer to me.
Do we know? Is it Tuesday, Wednesday?
Tuesday, it's supposed to be Tuesday. We're hearing 2:15.
Oh, okay. We're hearing from whom?
Well,
that's your sources.
the general, it's out there. His attorneys have been talking, and so he's supposedly coming in on Monday night. If you want to go to Trump Tower to greet him, John, and then Tuesday he'll be down at the criminal courthouse.
Excellent, and you'll be there too, I suspect. Thank you, June Grasso.
My pleasure,
Bailey
John.
Lipschitz.
My pleasure.
It's great having you both here. June Grasso, Bloomberg News legal analyst, and Bailey Lipschitz, U.S. equities reporter for Bloomberg.
Yeah, let's get a check of the latest world and national news now. Go things over to Denise Pellegrini from the Bloomberg 1130 newsroom right here in New York.
Yeah, thank you, John. And former President Trump expected to be arraigned 2:15, as you mentioned, then booked at 2:30 on those charges related to money paid to keep a relationship with porn actress Stormy Daniels secret during his 2016 presidential campaign. CNN, as you mentioned, reporting 30 counts in this indictment, and the sheer number, something Robert Mintz, former federal prosecutor and partner at McCarter and English, says signal even deeper charges.
30 counts, if that reporting proves to be accurate, suggests that it involves something beyond the hush money payments that were connected to Stormy Daniels.
Now, security is already tight in lower Manhattan. Mintz also telling Sound On with Joe Matthew police should be very concerned about possible violence by some Trump supporters. President Biden asked by reporters about the Wall Street Journal reporter arrested in Russia on espionage charges.
To Russia as they're detaining this Wall Street Journal reporter.
Let him go. Let him go, Biden said. He commented about the Evan Gershkovich case while heading to see tornado damage in Mississippi. President also says right now no plans to expel any Russian diplomats in response. Fuel or electric vehicles will be in line for tax credits. That's under new guidance from the Treasury Department. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager is tracking those developments from Washington for us.
The agency says the Inflation Reduction Act will leave just a few EV models eligible for up to $7,500 in credits as of April 18th. That's because most EV makers still won't be sourcing battery components or minerals from North America or U.S. free trade partners by then. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin put out a statement following this guidance. He says it completely ignores the intent of the climate spending law to encourage domestic EV investment. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global News 24 hours a day. I'm Denise Pellegrini, and this is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We've got 20 minutes to go until we wrap up the first quarter. The Dow positive now for the year. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks with a strong bid today, with the Dow currently up 340 points. S&P's gained 46, and NASDAQ is higher by 172. The U.S. 10-year yield drops to 3.47%. Gold is down 10. Energy is climbing, and Bitcoin is higher by 0.8%. Of the main 11 S&P sectors, all were trading in the green, led by gains in consumer discretionary and telecom. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, Home Depot, and Intel, while fractional losses in Walgreens and Amgen. In other news, Micron fell on a report that China will launch a cybersecurity review of Micron's sales. And wrapping things up, Oracle hit a fresh 52-week high. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, have a great weekend, Bill Maloney. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, this is Jess Minton back with John Tucker, and I'm excited to speak with our next guest, JT. So we have David Dietz, who's managing principal and senior investment strategist at PPAC Private Wealth Management. He's on the phone from Summit, New Jersey. And David, I'm glad you're here with us because, as you know, this is the end of what's been a gangbuster first quarter, especially when you're looking at the NASDAQ 100 on pace for its best quarterly gain since 2020 and the second best in the past decade. So I want you to unpack this for us and wrap it up as far as how have you been positioning in the past quarter and what have you been potentially buying the dip on?
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be with you guys this afternoon. So, the Q1, basically what was pounded last year did spectacularly well in this first quarter. So we know the NASDAQ was down 35% last year. It's led the indexes this year up about 20% as it accelerates here at the end of the day. Well, the Dow, which is the best of the three indexes last year, admittedly down, but down less than 10%, is the laggard in the group. It may end up perhaps 1%. So that's one theme. The other theme, of course, is when you start looking at, what sectors did best, it is those NASDAQ sectors, the information technology, the communications group, up, about 10% just this month of March, about 20% for the year. Those sectors were given up for dead, and now, they're off to the races again. Those sectors that did a little bit better last year relative to the overall market really didn't do well, and that may be the opportunity. We'll see. But, the financials are down about 7%. And then you got the energy, utilities, real estate, and surprisingly, healthcare also are down negative for the quarter.
And you mentioned financials. Have you been buying the dip that we've seen so far the past couple of weeks with the pullback in bank stocks?
So it's a very controversial area. We just don't know what people are thinking, deposits moving in, deposits moving out. But if I had to make one call here, it would be the group of regional banks. Any one bank, they're very opaque. It's very hard to figure out how those deposit flows are going. But I think one thing that investors need to keep in mind is not just a financial issue with those regional banks, it's a political issue. And here's why. You've got politicos in places like South Carolina and Iowa and Ohio. The last thing, ultimately, they want to tell their up-and-coming businesses, if you want a loan, put your tie on and grovel to the big Wall Street banks and hope they hand you some money and spend some time with you. That's not going to work politically. They want too big to fail in each of their states.
Right. So how are you advising clients to position with all of that going on?
There are no no-brainers in this business, but certainly one way to to play it is to get an ETF of regional banks, a package. The idea is this asset class isn't going away. Any one bank might have a misstep. You're not quite sure what's in their portfolio, but as a group, they cannot go away. I'm looking here just the worst 20 performers in the S&P 500 for March. 18 of them are banks, and all but one are trading now at single-digit price-to-earnings ratio when that overall market has moved up from 17 to 18. So, will happen in the next couple of weeks? Who knows? But, why wouldn't, over the next few years, they double or triple?
I hate to be nervous, Nelly, here, but I will point out some of the major average, well, particularly S&P 500, being driven by kind of a narrow band of stocks, right, David? Should I be nervous?
Certainly, I think some of the upside has been taken away. So, for example, the Information Technology Group was trading at a 20 PE at the start of the quarter. Now it's done so well that price-earnings ratio is at 24. Now, could it go higher? Sure. At the start of last year, it was 28. But here's the problem for the bulls in that type of a bet. Last year, the 2-year Treasury in the beginning of the year was just 0.75%. Today, it's over 4%, almost 7 times more. And the fact of the matter is, you have to moderate your PEs once the competing investments like bonds, interest rates keep going up. So I don't think it's going to go up to 28. So I think it's brought forward some of the gains for the year. And heck, if you could close the year at 15%, 16% of the NASDAQ, why wouldn't you do that? So I probably would be taking some profits from that area and rotating into the healthcare, real estate, financial services area.
Okay. Now, how much of the rise do you suppose is predicated on the idea that we're going to see cuts later this year from the Fed?
A lot. It all starts with inflation. And although part of the reason February was so bad is we got a very hot number for January, we just saw this morning a softer than expected PCE deflator inflation number, which apparently is the one that the Fed prefers. So we are gradually seeing a rolling over in inflation. Certainly is much less hot than it was, for example, last summer. It's not going to go in any one direction in a straight line, but it seems to be receding, and that makes sense. We're seeing commodities down. Obviously, with the higher interest rates, real estate is under pressure, auto sales are under pressure, so the economy is cooling. That will allow interest rates to come back down. I mean, at one point, the 2-year was over 5, now it's just over 4. That helps. And ultimately, the markets dictate to the Fed what they're going to do. Ultimately, it's not the Fed that tells the markets what's going to happen. And I think ultimately, and we're seeing some signs in the last presser that there may only be one more rate hike, the Fed will be less of a headwind than it was last year, and that's great.
David, what about tech stocks that have been on such a tear this year? How are you positioning in that corner of the market?
So, I think you want to be a little bit more selective because those valuations have moved up, but some may offer still some good opportunities. So, for example, Meta platforms was one of the best performers, up about 70% in the first quarter, but its price-to-earnings ratio is still under 20. And of course, Zuckerberg's on a tear. This is the year of efficiency, so he's cutting out all sorts of excess costs, reducing capital expenditures into Meta, moving into AI, and of course, it's a unique property with billions of people tuning into their social media platforms every day. And if the economy doesn't go into a hard recession, that social media advertising is going to pick up. That may be something that you want to continue to play, even though it's done so well so far this year.
David, from the great state of New Jersey. How are your property taxes, David? Sore subject.
I love New Jersey because I'm so close to New York and you guys.
Okay. I should point. Well, I'm down at the shore, so anyway, consumer discretionary stocks. I should point out, I don't have any discretion anymore when it comes to consumers. So anyway, that's the best performer in the S&P 500. David Dietz, the managing principal and senior investment strategist at PPAC Private Wealth Management, on the phone from Summit, New Jersey today. David, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Managing about $10 billion?
I wanted to point out, he talked about an ETF tracking regional banks. If you look at the KRE, that's down more than 25% this quarter, on pace for its worst quarter since March 2020. It's a big
Just
decline.
met John Tucker. Back in a minute.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pella. 3:53 now on Wall Street. China has opened a cybersecurity review of imports from America's largest memory chip maker, Micron Technology, opening a new front in the escalating battle between the two countries over dominance in the semiconductor market. Micron Technology shares, they are down 4.6% on a day when the rest of the market, specifically technology, is rallying. The Chinese government says it is conducting the review to ensure the security of its information infrastructure supply chain, prevent network security risks, and maintain national security. Netflix is restructuring its film group to make fewer movies each year and centralize decision-making. And with more on the Netflix story, here's Bloomberg's Steve Rappaport.
Charlie, Netflix will combine units that produce small and mid-sized pictures, a change that will result in a handful of layoffs and the departure of two of its most experienced executives. Lisa Nishimura, who led Netflix into stand-up comedy and original documentaries, will depart after more than 15 years at the company. She's presently responsible for documentaries and smaller budget films. The streaming service has released more original movies than any other company in Hollywood recently, producing upwards of 50 projects a year. The company is scheduled to report first quarter earnings on April 18th. Charlie?
Steve Rappaport. We've got Netflix up now by 2%. Norfolk Southern's being sued by the Justice Department over the train crash and chemical spill that forced the temporary evacuation of a small Ohio town in February. Those are the company stories we're following this hour. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, this is Jess Minton back with John Tucker. And I mean, just heading into the close, we have about 5 more minutes, JT, before we end this quarter.
5
We've
minutes
already
is an
talked
eternity
about
in radio.
so much size and scope for the major indexes, but let's talk about some individual movers. So in particular, Charles Schwab down more than 30%.
Now, they went down with the regional banks, but it's not a regional bank.
It's
What's
not.
the
It's
difference?
a brokerage.
What's the same?
It's a brokerage. So down more than 30% just this month alone. It would be its worst month since October of 1987. And actually, Morgan Stanley did cut its earnings estimates for Charles Schwab, and this happened yesterday because of the impact of so many clients that have been moving their cash to high-yielding options. And obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty of how long that could continue, but I've actually had a lot of my sources who are long-only fund managers who have been buying this dip.
They see opportunity.
Yeah,
in
they
this
feel
decline.
like it's been swept up in a lot of the mess of and the stress of the
Well, let me
banks
just
that that's
back up.
been-
It's
Sure.
so you have your money with Schwab
Right.
in what I would assume is the equivalent of some sort of cash management account, and it doesn't make much money. It doesn't get much interest, so move it somewhere else.
Right, and that's what's been driving a lot of this.
And how does Charles Schwab make money? Because commissions are free now, right?
Yeah, well, that's the big problem with a lot of these brokerages, because not even just the last few years, but this has been a big thing of over the last decade, this zero fee and where people are going to do this. And to compete with each other with these brokerages, they've tried to be really tough on how to do that. So I think that's the problem. It's because they've gotten caught up in a lot of this mess and there's zero fees. How do they go and they make money? And so that's been a big challenge. But I mean, you're seeing that stock pressured a lot. But there are people that have been buying the dip. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the second quarter for that stock in
And
particular.
the thing that caught my interest with it when I looked into it, they do have the bond ETF that's getting a lot of attention.
They
I mean,
do.
I sound like a commercial for Schwab right
You
now,
do. It does. It's like
Gotta
a
give 'em a
commercial
break.
for Schwab. Yeah. No, but this is definitely when you're looking at the spectrum of financial companies that have this exposure and which ones have definitely been pummeled. That one in particular has, but it'll be interesting to see how that exactly plays out, JT.
All right, let's give you an update on stocks right now as we close out the quarter. S&P 500, 57 points higher. That's up 1.4%. Dow's up 399. And the NASDAQ 100, 217 points higher. Bloomberg Beyond the Bell starts right now.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
About 2 minutes to go before the end of the trading day. Scarlett Fu here along with Katie Greifeld. We're counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help us take you beyond the bell with a global simulcast is Jess Menton and John Tucker. And of course, we bring together our Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, and YouTube audiences along with originals worldwide as we look at how we're wrapping up the trading day, week, and quarter. And what surprises me, Jess, is the extent to which there seems to be so much optimism. It's a broad-based advance. Yes, we got encouraging inflation data, but there are a lot of reasons to be concerned in terms of what's to come in the weeks ahead. Anything from earnings to inflation still being fairly high.
Right. We'll still have the jobs report next Friday. It's actually on Good Friday, so that's going to be a holiday, so markets aren't supposed to be open for that. But as you know, Scarlett, as well, we'll have those earnings from JP Morgan on the 14th, kicking off big bank earnings, obviously regionals being in focus. In the middle of that month, also, we'll get another CPI report. So there's still a lot on the docket coming up, John.
Yeah, and I'm taking a look at some of the stocks that were decliners today. Standing out, Virgin Orbit, VORB, all-time low there, the satellite launch provider, connected, of course, to Richard Branson, ceasing operations, a cash crunch. They're cutting 85% of the workforce. They are going to retain some people, but those are the people who are going to wind the company down. VORB right now is down 39.5%.
And I mean, there you go. We've been talking about how big tech is rallying, but then you look at some of the profitless tech names, it's a different story.
Yeah, that's a great chart, and we'll bring that to you shortly. But for the moment, we are getting ready to close out near session highs with the Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ up by more than 1%. I was going to say 1.5%, and that's the case for the S&P, but not yet for the Dow. And for the NASDAQ 100, this will be the best quarter performance since 2020, and one of the best over the past decade, Jess.
And Scarlett, you were talking about how this broad-based rally is playing out today. If you look at the number of advancers, 440 in the S&P 500, about 87%, actually 88% now that we're at the close. And then you're looking at the decliners, just 12% or 62 stocks, Katie.
And let's take a look at the industry groups. And it really paints the same pictures that this was a big, broad rally. You look at the top, you see autos leading the way up about 5.5% or so. A lot of that coming from Tesla. You're also seeing the same thing if you look at some of the media and entertainment stocks and also real estate, et cetera. The list goes on. We go down to the bottom to some of the relative underperformers. Not sure if that's a word, but you can see energy up about 0.6%, and telecom also up about 0.6%. So even the losers are winning today, Jess.
Yeah, and taking a look under the hood again on the S&P 500, looking at BlackBerry. So that stock up 14%. So basically it's best since June 2021. So it did post quarterly revenue. Unfortunately, that missed estimates, but apparently it had a smaller per share earnings and adjusted loss than analysts were anticipating. So you saw that driving the stock. I have to talk about Tesla because it was all discretionary, right? Doing so well today. So you look at that stock up more than 6%. And also, this is important to note, this weekend Tesla is expected to release its delivery numbers for the first quarter. So that's going to be in focus and could most likely move the stock once it starts trading in the beginning of next week. And then I'm going to end with Align Technology. So this is the orthodontics company. It makes Invisalign, those clear aligners. So if you look at that stock up 7%, it's one of the biggest gainers among those in the NASDAQ 100 today. And it did get a couple of upgrades on potential positivity as far as that company moving forward. But those were the three top ones for today, ladies.
All right. Why do I get stuck with the losers? Another electric vehicle maker, Nikola.
You're the sole guy, that's why.
Yeah, okay. Their $100 million share offering priced at $1.12 a piece. That's like a 20% discount since the last close. The proceeds supposed to be used for working capital and some of the corporate expenses. The plan to sell 30 million shares to the public, 59 million shares to one of the investors. Right now, 15% lower in today's trading.
I love the headset look, John.
Yeah.
It's great.
The loser reporter.
Oh, God. Okay, let's barrel on to the bond market, keep this conversation on track. It was a day that we had. It was still quiet, but a little bit more activity, especially if you look at the short end. Once again, you had yields fall about 9 basis points, a rally in the front end there. The 2-year Treasury yield approaching 4%. Once again, so again, even though we're past peak volatility, it feels like people are sticking to their maybe dovish Fed pivot sort of bets there. You can see that rally extended out the curve as well. 10-year Treasury yields down by about 7 basis points. The long end, too, the 30-year yield down about 8 basis points. So I don't know. It's the end of the trading day. It's the end of the trading quarter. And maybe it feels like if you look at financial markets, guys, we're back to a calmer place, Scarlett.
Or we'll start next quarter on Monday with a brand new clean slate, and it feels like there's a lot of things to be worried about. We were just speaking with Tom Galvin of Citi Rockdale, and he was making the point that the pandemic pulled forward tech spending, and once the tech companies start reporting their results and giving their outlooks, you're going to start to see a lot of that show up, and perhaps people realize that the stock prices got ahead of themselves.
And guys, we did get that update yesterday, right, when it came to the balance sheet data with the Fed, but I believe we're supposed to get another one after the bell, right, as far as what the deposit data looks like. So that's something I'm going to be focusing on, especially just the scrutiny a lot of that loan data has gone under, obviously, the last few weeks because of the bank stresses. Okay, more losers. Let's go to New Jersey. Not that New Jersey's a loser. Bed Bath & Beyond, where they are based, down today 28%. The company's likely going to go bankrupt if its last gasp $300 million equity offering fails. Even the day traders seem to have given up on this one, guys.
It is interesting. I mean, you are seeing, as we talk about just an incredible size and scopes when it comes to the quarter, particularly for tech, that you do still have this shakeout, that you're seeing some of the shakier, weaker credits really get squeezed here. I mean, Bed Bath & Beyond is a great example.
Yeah, any company that needs cash right now, that's facing a cash crunch, people are not willing to be patient with them at all, right? And Nikola was also another company that's in a similar boat because it had a stock issuance of $100 million, and that got pushed out. And Katie, you were talking about the chart earlier about profitless technology companies, how they've really lagged behind overall technology.
And another big thing, we've obviously been talking so much about the 2-year this year, right? I mean, especially even last year as well. But a couple other indicators that have been close on the radar for my sources, they've been looking at what happens with oil as well as the dollar as far as what that could mean for equities in the second quarter. So if, say, oil, for whatever reason, we see it at $50 a barrel, or if you see the dollar with parity with the euro, those are things that could really gyrate the U.S. equity market. So those are a couple other things in addition to the 2-year that a lot of my sources are keeping their eyes on.
I mean, the energy trade has just been fascinating. Right. We've been reflecting on the fact that energy really did not have a great quarter, but if you think back to the past 2 calendar years, energy has been the reliable outperformer, but no more. You have, I mean, with the price of oil at what, $75 a barrel, obviously that's not quite close to the highs where we were last year that we were talking about.
Yeah, all the optimism has been priced in already. Looking ahead to next week, Jess, you had mentioned earlier that we have the jobs report. That's going to be front and center, but all the Fed speak that's been coming out, I'm not sure that there hasn't been a consistent message. It's no different from what we've been getting all along, which is that we still have more work to do, and we're not ready to let up on the brakes.
Right, more work to do. And when you're talking about the jobs report, we'll also have that average hourly earnings that'll be really scrutinized in that data as well as for what it means. But I know we're not going to get to the big earnings, obviously, like we talked about with JP Morgan in the middle next month, but we will get Constellation Brands next week. It's actually next Thursday, so that's the maker of Corona and Modelo and all of that, but that's a company I'm going to be watching next week.
All right, guys, a lot to look forward to, but that does it for now for our cross-platform coverage of the market close on Bloomberg Television, Radio, YouTube, and Originals. We'll be back Monday, same time, same place.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
And you're listening to Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker along with Jess Menton. I forgot who we're filling in for.
Who are they?
Carol Messer, and I'm Carol.
You're Carol.
You're Tim.
I'm Tim.
Well, let's bring in our
them.
next guest, Andy Purdy with Huawei USA. He's the Chief Security Officer. Going to help us detail some of the company's 2022 financial reports, some of the particulars there. Andy, thanks for being on the program. You're in Washington. Give us some of the highlights of what the report says.
Well, we have been in a difficult situation for a couple of years, and we're pleased that our business has stabilized, and we are in a position to move forward. We are finding tremendous success in our 5G to B business, and we're investing historic amounts of money, in this case 25.1% of our revenue, over $23 billion in R&D, to help us deal with the recent unpleasantries and to help us find, working with partners, the path forward to help grow our business.
Hey, Andy, unpack this latest report for us. What were the biggest takeaways?
Well, the overall revenue increased slightly. Our carrier business had a slight increase. Our enterprise business did tremendous, up 30%. And that's really around our 5G to B, our digitalization. Right now, we work with 700 cities in the world, 267 of the Fortune Global 500 companies under digital strategy. We've got 9 million developers and 40,000 ecosystem partners. And we're also announcing results of individual additional units. For example, in digital power and cloud, those are important areas for us that we look forward to driving some real progress in the years ahead.
Hey, you're a subsidiary of Huawei Technologies, which we all know is the largest maker of telecom equipment. The launch of sort of a new social control era in China focuses on technology, tracking technology, whatever you want to call it at this point. And you have been scrutinized on Capitol Hill, not unlike what we saw with TikTok. What is happening on that front when it comes to the regulatory capacity in Congress?
Well, the two major areas, one has to do with our ability to do business in the United States, and it's clear the United States is not interested in allowing us to do business in the United States. So that's a reality. We're not going to complain about it. We're going to move forward. The other is the question of trade restrictions, the ability of American companies to sell non-sensitive technologies to us. And while I applaud the efforts under the CHIPS Act to bring a lot of jobs to America, the fact is I'm concerned about American jobs in the semiconductor industry, their ability to sell non-sensitive technologies to us. I think it could be a difficult future, and I hope there might be a way to allow the sale of such non-sensitive technologies to us.
And when it comes to these security issues, what did you find had the most red flags?
Well, the issues over a number of years, and there really has not been anything specific. Obviously, there have been some geopolitical concerns. And so what we have tried to do around the world, in the European Union, in Germany, and all around the world, is we try to develop and maintain the trust of our customers and the trust of the folks they have to deal with, their particular governments. We're a supplier, they're an operator. And so we have worked very hard on our global cybersecurity and privacy assurance program, on partnering with standards bodies, on partnering, for example, with the telecom equipment effort that the standards bodies form to create specific requirements for telecom companies, specific testing requirements and accountability requirements. All those things we find gives the ability for most of the countries in the world to be able to push back and say, no, there isn't a problem with Huawei. We take cybersecurity seriously. We take privacy seriously. And frankly, as I hear all this commotion, I hope the United States is going to take privacy protection a whole lot more seriously than we have in the past. National privacy legislation will be good, but that's not going to be good enough to help address the risk involving, for example, social media companies.
Well, how much of what Huawei does around the world relates to governments keeping tabs on their people?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, the issue of surveillance is not something that we do. There's some.
But I mean, supplying the components to enable that.
Well, the issues about what products you sell that could be misused, and draw a very rough analogy, the idea of a hammer can be used for good, it can be used for bad. We don't help governments create special algorithms or special technologies that they can use to abuse people. And we are working globally to participate in the development of ethical principles for some of these things that go beyond the issue of complying with the individual requirements in individual countries. And we think those kinds of efforts are what's going to be necessary to help address the risk of misuse by governments. And there's definitely a risk there.
Is there a path back into the United States?
There is so much business to do around the world, so many places where people right now are anxious for us to do business. So we are not really pursuing the possibility of doing business in the United States. And frankly, I'm glad that at least we can share some of the lessons we're learning about how countries and companies, how governments can benefit from the new technology, so that hopefully the United States, not with us, but hopefully the United States can ramp up their efforts to get the benefits of these technologies and to grow the competitiveness of America. And one of the great shortcomings has to do with our talent, our workforce, because we're really not stepping up for the future.
Andy, you brought up government legislation earlier. What do you think specifically needs to be in that with regards to privacy?
Well, I think we've seen some recent examples of what shouldn't be in there, and I defer to the privacy experts as to what, and the industry experts as to what should be in privacy legislation. But I think there need to be more than those kinds of requirements, because the minimal requirements that you can get legislatures to agree on are not going to be good enough, given the risk, given one of the lessons we learned 2 years ago with these major cyber attacks on trusted American companies, SolarWinds and Microsoft Exchange Server, prove there's no such thing as trusted suppliers. They're trusted, but the bad guys can hack into them. So whoever's got data, whoever has important functions, and as we move into 5G-enabled technologies, automation, machine-to-machine communication, sensor-to-machine, we have to make sure that those systems are going to be running. So we have to make sure that no matter who the supplier is, there are objective and transparent basis for knowing whether those products and services, whether those data are protected. And I think the leaders of cybersecurity in the United States are moving in the right direction, but we've got to really ramp up those efforts to promote assurance, transparency, and accountability.
What is the future hold for your company in terms of technology?
Well, right now, the proof case of the 5G to business, the digitalization of industries and sub-industries is so exciting. And the benefits of smart mining and ports and manufacturing, the efforts that we're working with the major carriers in the world to help reduce the carbon footprint, to help meet the UN goals. We are actively participating in how to generate green energy, how to transport it, how to save it, how to increase the efficiency of everything that's done, and find ways to use more green energy. And so the future is very, very bright, particularly with the strong partners that we have around the world.
And you're talking about green energy. What specifically are those strategies whenever you were talking to how to improve all of this?
Well, you have some existing technology that you want them to be more efficient. So, for example, in the carrier networks, data centers and base stations, kind of like antennas, use up a lot of energy. So using technology, sometimes with algorithms, to try to take advantage of when they're not being used to reduce the power consumption. And in terms of whether they're stored outside or inside, whether you have to use air conditioning, those kinds of techniques can increase efficiency and can promote a reduction in the carbon footprint. And the fact is that hardcore research and development, working with our partners to try to develop green energy and how to bring it forward, how to find ways to deliver power that's based on green energy, is something that we're working hard on, and we're making substantial progress on. It's exciting to be part of that.
You mentioned smart mining. Give me the dummy's definition, me being the dummy, of smart mining.
So, for example, you know how drone pilots don't have to be on the battlefield. So increasingly, and we've got a number of examples in Africa and China and other places where you create special 5G, special power requirements. There can be 5G underground, so you can have the sensors, you can have the machines, so that they can control the equipment without going down in the mines. There's one mine my colleague told me about, he visited, it's 3,000 meters underground. And the working shift for the workers is 4 weeks. They have to go down there for 4 weeks. So the idea of having this technology that can allow not only the operations, but the monitor of safety. So you have like a 30-meter giant machine that's doing the mining, and you have multiple cameras to monitor them. So you use an AI algorithm to stitch together the videos along that 30-meter strip so that the operator can monitor it, and you can have and those who are providing oversight for safety and control and resilience, they can monitor it also. It's the same thing with the ports. The ability to have automation can increase efficiency and help cut down on some of the supply chain bottlenecks are there. And manufacturing generally, the greater efficiency of the manufacturing process is going to save money and reduce energy consumption. And this stuff is all very exciting.
Andy, thanks a lot. Andy Purdy, Huawei's USA Chief Security Officer, detailing some of the financial report of the company's 22 financial results. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
news, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
4:21 on Wall Street. It is on to the second quarter in the trading month of April. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, big day for the U.S. stock market. 3 up weeks in a row for the S&P 500 index on the week. The S&P was up 3.5%. 2 in a row for the Dow on the week, up 3.2%. 3 winning weeks in a row for NASDAQ, up by 3.4%. The Dow now positive for the year. Today up 1.3%, higher by 415 points. The S&P back above 4,100, closing at 4,109, up 58 points. A gain today of 1.4%. NASDAQ rallied 208 points, up 1.7%. Tech shares extending the week's stock rally after a key measure of inflation cooled last month. 10-year yield 3.47%. The 2-year 4.04%. Spot gold down $10 the ounce to $19.69. Bitcoin up 0.9%, 28,404 on Bitcoin. And West Texas Intermediate crude back above $75 a barrel, $75.54. A gain today of 1.6%. So again, recapping a rally into the close. S&P 500 index up 58, a gain of 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks, Charlie. This is Jess Minton back with JT, John Tucker, and we are
not Justin Timberlake.
not that JT. And so we've got another great guest in our lineup. So Kathy Kraninger, and she's the former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, also vice president of regulatory affairs at Solid Labs. She's on Zoom from Washington D.C. And so
is it solid or solid? How do you pronounce that? Solidus?
Correct.
Solidus,
okay.
Excuse me. Solidus.
Sorry to correct you on
Sorry
the
to
air,
butcher
Jess.
that, but we corrected it. So Solidus Labs, so to give some context to our listeners, it's a crypto market surveillance firm that works with exchanges, regulators, and investment firms to flag market manipulation and other risk issues. And so, Kathy, I want you to break this down for us because obviously we've had the wake of multiple bank collapses. We've also had FTX in recent months. What happened with that situation is still ongoing, obviously, right? But then how exactly has all of this ended up impacting the crypto market specifically?
It has a dramatic impact. Look, I believe in the future of the digital asset space. I think it's the future of the internet. That's why I joined this industry, and I'm excited to be, wearing a white hat at Solidus Labs, which, as you noted, looks for manipulation and seeks to root out fraud in this space. But the news of FTX, the tentacles that FTX had across the globe to regulators, to policymakers, it was looked at as a leader in some respects in the conversation around what regulation and what responsible market participants should do. And you see that it was a big scam. And as you noted, additional charges were brought this week, and more keeps coming on that. But look, fraud is not new, and certainly digital asset markets did not invent it. You see this in traditional finance. There are regular enforcement actions against the biggest banks and institutions, in financial services on a not infrequent basis. And also there are scammers who are always going to seek to take advantage of people unfairly. And the hope is that prosecutors go after them, and to the fullest extent of the law, they manage to claw back funds and make people who were hurt whole.
In the crypto space, am I correct to say it's the platforms where all the hookiness has been taking place?
Like the platforms perform an important role to the extent that you've got intermediaries in the space. Of course, one of the promises and directions of digital asset markets is decentralization. So you don't always necessarily have to have that intermediary in the middle. But look, many of us don't want to manage our own wallets individually and understand, the details of the security that would be needed to engage directly in the space. So you're going to have platforms in the future. And some of the core issues are really around what these underlying assets are, and then therefore which regulatory structure is required of them. There is still a requirement around transparency and fairness and disclosure And many of the good market participants in this space are doing that to the best of their ability, complying with the law that applies to them, using capabilities like we provide at Solidus Labs. But there are also those that are not doing that.
Oh, and I got to ask the obligatory question: is this a currency or a commodity? I mean, who's the regulator? Gary Gensler wants to
John,
be.
you're getting to the heart of the matter. That is part of the challenge. I do fundamentally believe that digital assets are not just of one nature. It's not one type of asset. And so the question of, what is it is, an asset by asset assessment that is not, foreign to lawyers who are looking at those things that are, instruments in traditional finance. Those are there are clear rules around securities. We talk a lot about the Howey test and the Reeves test, but those need to be applied. And the platforms are saying we're applying those tests. And Chairman Gensler is saying, I don't think so. So there's a lot to be worked out, definitely in the courts on that front. That is completely separate from, fraud and bad actors. Wanted to make sure I said that pretty clearly.
And what are your thoughts on Senator Elizabeth Warren in her position on crypto? Because I know that the Senate obviously has a particular stance on the market regulation, but what's going on there and how do you see all of that playing out?
Look, I think Congress needs to engage in the space and members need to be educated and understand the technology, think through the best way to put a specific regulatory framework into place. I'm one of the people that believes Congress needs to act on that front. And so you have members that are really engaged and have spent the time. Senators Lummis and Gillibrand had a bipartisan bill they issued last year. They're working on it again and going to reissue that this year. You have leadership on the House Financial Services Committee, too, that is excited about, trying to tackle the issues around stablecoins and market structure. The agriculture committees in the House and the Senate, too, really engaging in this space. So there are going to be a lot of different perspectives. And I just fundamentally believe, as I said, that the future of the internet and the future of so many things about how our economy can operate, innovate, and be accessible for the future is in this technology. But there are risks, and those need to be weighed, as does the right regulatory regime.
Where are we in the regulatory front? I mean, in a nutshell, is it happening?
It's happening through the courts. That's likely.
Well, that's not really regulation. That's more like you got to do this, guys, or else.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part about this. You're seeing it through enforcement actions from the SEC and the CFTC. Some of them clearly designed to try to put the bounds around crypto assets and define them as securities or commodities, but not in a direct way, not by issuing notice and comment regulation. And that's where you get to Congress, too, because in some respects, Congress needs to solve some of these issues. But you do also have the SEC issuing regulations around custody that encompass certainly many aspects of traditional finance, but also encompass crypto assets, too.
I mean, is the industry welcoming all this? I mean, they were obviously, one of the reasons for being is to avoid that or not be regulated or whatever. Do they now welcome it or what?
The industry has been pretty consistent, although it is hard with decentralization to talk about it as one industry. But to be clear, those who are the platforms that you mentioned earlier, John, and those that are in intermediaries in the space, they know they have regulatory responsibilities under current law. They know there are regulatory responsibilities that need to be shaped and take into account the differences with these assets and the differences with these markets. And so that's something that, we've put forth as the industry, a lot of different ideas around this, and do want to see Congress act and do want to see the SEC and the CFTC engage.
What do you think is the most realistic way to try to address fraud? Because we've seen so many instances and scandals, as you know, especially even in recent months in the crypto world.
It is incredibly disheartening. There's no other way to say it. And some of it is just, unfortunately, the nature of anything that's new. You noted I was the director of the CFPB. the types of scams and frauds that really go after vulnerable populations. They're constant, so they're not unique to digital assets. But I see an opportunity, and we see it in our ability at Solidus to identify rug pulls. We can preclude those bad actors from at all benefiting from and getting the funds off-ramped out of the blockchain ecosystem. So therefore, completely disincentivizing deploying the scam to begin with. And so those are some of the things that the technology can really facilitate. They deploy a token, you can only buy, you can't actually sell, you can't get out of it. And then the person who actually deployed that does a rug pull, pulls all the funds, and then escapes with those funds. If you can't identify that as a rug pull and stop them from escaping with the funds, there's no benefit then in deploying the scams to begin with. And that's something this technology facilitates.
I have a reverse barometer. Whenever people talk about it at the barbershop, I run. I run. And that's all they were talking about it a few years ago, crypto. Kathy, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. That was interesting. Kathy Kraniger, the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Solidus Laboratories. They work with the exchanges and presumably on the regulatory front as well. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio. Now, right now, let's get a check on the latest world of national news. Denise Pellegrini is in the Bloomberg 1130 newsroom in New York. Hi, Denise.
Hey there, John. Thank you. Yeah, we're watching very closely what's happening with the charges against former President Trump. He's expected to be arraigned in a Manhattan court Tuesday, as we've been reporting, at about 2:15, booked at about 2:30. And this will be on charges in that sealed indictment related to money paid to keep that extramarital porn actor Stormy Daniels' relationship quiet during the 2016 presidential campaign. And some critics are saying this is just about the weakest of the cases, John, that prosecutors could have brought against the former president. But former Representative Stephanie Murphy, member of the January 6th committee, tells Bloomberg Sound On, don't blame the timing or the choice on Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg.
It was actually a grand jury that, when presented with the information, thought that there might be something criminal that had happened here and proceeded with the charges. So I know there's a lot of focus on the DA, but this is working through the system the way that the American judicial system is supposed to work.
And Murphy is a Florida Democrat who served until earlier this year. Response coming in from Trump family members to all this. Daughter Ivanka saying on her Instagram story she loves her father and she loves her country and she's pained for both. Bipartisan effort to shore up Social Security may be hitting a political roadblock. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports on what's happening.
An ad hoc group of senators has been working on a deal, but they say the upcoming presidential race is making it tougher to get one done. President Biden has been accusing Republicans of wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare. Former President Donald Trump, at the same time, is running on a campaign promise to leave those programs alone. Republican Senator Mike Rounds is part of the Senate group. He tells Bloomberg News it's going to take an adult running for the White House to get a deal on entitlements done. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm Denise Pellegrini. This
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We check markets all day long here on Bloomberg. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ advanced today, a rally into the close with the Dow now positive for 2023, up 415 points today, the final trading day of the quarter. That was a gain of 1.3%. The Dow today, as I mentioned, closing at 33,274. S&P up 58 today, back at 4109, a gain of 1.4%. NASDAQ, the outperformer today, up 208 points. That was a gain for NASDAQ today of just about 1.7%. NASDAQ, by the way, had 3 winning weeks in a row. And as we move on to the trading month of April, S&P also up by 3 weeks in a row. So we close the books on the first quarter. Off to the second quarter, NASDAQ on the quarter up 16.7%. So what were the outperformers? David Dietz is Senior Portfolio Strategist at PPAC Private Wealth Management, and he was our guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
When you start looking at, what sectors did best, it is those NASDAQ sectors, the information technology, the communications group, up, about 10% just this month of March, about 20% for the year. Those sectors were given up for dead, and now, they're off to the races again.
10-year yield, 3.47%. The 2-year, 4.03%. Spot gold down $11 the ounce to $19.68. Drop there of 0.6%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.7%, $75.65 a barrel. MicroStrategy co-founder and executive chairman Michael Saylor's more than $4 billion bet on Bitcoin is on the verge of turning profitable once again after the first quarter surge in the value of the original cryptocurrency. MicroStrategy shares up today by 4.6%. Bitcoin up 1% to 28,425. Recapping, 10-year yield 3.47%. S&P up 58 as we head into the second quarter, up today by 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks, Charlie. Jess Minton here again with John Tucker. And you know what, JT? I'm very excited about our next guest because this is a company that's female-run by their strategy. So we have Stephanie Blake, the Chief Executive Officer of Skylight Studios, on Zoom from Petaluma, California. No, you're still invited. We're not going to kick you out, JT. And so, Stephanie, I hear you're taking old iconic buildings and turning them into something cool. Tell us about what Skylight Studio is and what you do.
Hi, yeah, so Skylight, we are a placemaking and venue development and management firm, and we focus on adaptive reuse. We were founded actually in 2008, so similar times, if not potentially worse, for commercial real estate. But for us, we drive creative revenue streams and new uses to often historic or underutilized properties by bringing in brands, Fortune 100 companies, to do experiences, to foster sort of a new way of gathering and entertainment. And we've been doing it for the last 15 years. Looking from the High Line to Moynihan Station, the Ferry Building in San Francisco, Ghirardelli Square, Detroit. So that is what we've been doing, and I think see a ton of opportunity right now.
Stephanie, let me paint the picture for you. Where are we? 58th and Lexington
59th
Avenue.
and Lex, yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know where I am. Look out the window. Well, look downstairs. There used to be a Starbucks. Remember in this building? There was an H&M on the first floor. Gone. The Container Store is gone.
There's a chocolate store there now instead of the Starbucks, I believe.
Well, Matt Miller thinks it's a front for something else. There's a Victoria's Secret that's gone. What is the state of commercial real estate from where you sit?
Yeah, from where we sit, I think that there's often a trend. I think what was it now? As of 10 years and change ago, retail was in question. What is the future? What is the future of the ground floor? I think right now with, COVID having accelerated the question mark of a lot of these traditional uses, what gets you out the door? What is the use of the built environment? Do you need to go to work? I think that's the question mark that's happening. And I think a lot of the transactions that have sort of been the foundation of commercial real estate with Fortune 100 tenants, expecting them to continue, where office was not a question. Everyone needs to go to work. Everyone needs a place to go. With that in question, in combination with how retail has continued to evolve, I think that there's an opportunity now to really rethink how people are using space, how people come and interact, and why. And I think that's where we're seeing this convergence of a venue being the new anchor of development, where you can put F&B that rotates. It can enable you to welcome the future by thinking about how, an entertainment concept might be paired with a retail concept, paired with culinary. And I think that's the future, is this collaborative approach to space.
Tell us more about how you're working with landlords.
Yeah, so we work with landlords in many different ways. Our partnerships with landlords often look like they have space and they're not sure exactly how to create dynamic and vibrant sort of differentiators. So I think the same way that it was it fitness, food, amenity space was what was driving office and tenants back and in the building, and it was an important sort of intersection. For us, when we work with landlords now, we come to the table with, how do you think about a venue? How do you think about the negative space in your building, in your corridors, in your outdoor spaces? And what is the programming that's going to not just be a beautifully designed space or have the right food, but how are you going to encourage interaction and encourage sort of using programming and experiences and events to help encourage people to interact and use the space? There's so many amenity spaces now that are being built still and are not being used. And I think that's where we've actually partnered a lot with architects alongside landlords to provide the heartbeat against the design.
Okay.
And I think that's
And the challenge is where everybody wants to work from home nowadays. I mean, it's got to be incredibly challenging for you. Do people come to you, landlords, businesses, and say, I want my people back in the office, they don't want to come back, but if you give me some ideas, maybe we can change that? I'm beer on tap, but that's another story.
And I think, my early days, I grew up at Google in my
you did have it then. Yeah.
But I will say, yes, so that is one challenge, absolutely, that we're brought to all the time. How do we get tenants back? How do we do, is it food? Is it, what is the thing? And I think people have hung their hat on it's food and fitness. I think the other challenge, or the other way in which we're a solution, is if you design a venue that's used by tenants, example, what we're doing right now at Penn District in the middle of Midtown, or in San Francisco with the auditorium at 345 Montgomery, there's an opportunity to think about a lot of companies who are not coming in daily. When do they come together? They want to come together when they're bringing various departments together, when they have meetings, when they have announcements. And it's interesting because we were, for a very long time, the types of assets we had, when we created a venue, it was often for external purposes. How do we wow our clients? How do we share a product launch? Now it's how do we actually bring our employees together and be able to show them why do you need to be together? What is the value of being together? And how do we create a meaningful experience? And so there's an opportunity for some of these buildings to be used not just by the tenants, having the amenity where you can bring people together, whether it's a beautiful auditorium, you have programming that's an option that can create different ideas and experiences, but also how do you bring in outside tenants to use the space as well? And I think there's an intersection now where meetings have risen exponentially. Today, I think it's a $260 billion market. By 2026, it's predicted to be a $500+ billion market. And so people are spending to bring their employees together, whether it's in the office or another space. And I think that's the value that you can bring.
And Stephanie, when it comes to higher interest rates, how has that been impacting the real estate environment in your view?
Yeah,
You got 30 seconds to say it.
Where we sit, we've been able to come to deals to sort of de-risk the opportunity from whether it's an investment or landlord perspective or a buyer's perspective. Obviously, interest rates will decrease transactions, which is again where you want to be able to bring in the best of many industries to use a space. It cannot just be office and expecting these tenants to come back and sign the 20-year leases. By creating venues, it enables you to use the best of these markets and the best of these industries to come together for meeting space as a catalyst to then enable other tenants to come in and share that space. And I think there's a lot of value in how that can be created.
Did you get the lunch today upstairs?
I did not have time.
You didn't have time.
I didn't have time.
You let that go to waste. It was tuna. It was tuna. It was like a tuna. So it was all right. Stephanie Blake, I can't look a gift tuna in the mouth. CEO at Skylight Studios, some unique real estate venue development. Stephanie, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. And you are listening to Bloomberg Radio. It sounds like a jazz station now.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 4:53 now on Wall Street. Norfolk Southern's being sued by the Justice Department over that train crash and chemical spill that forced the temporary evacuation of a small Ohio town back in February. According to a 28-page complaint filed in Ohio federal court, the department is seeking damages for alleged violations of the Clean Water Act, including, quote, unlawfully polluting the nation's waterways. Tesla shares are up by 68.4% this year. Investors are about to get new numbers from the electric vehicle maker on car sales. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Kimberly Adams.
Charlie, the Elon Musk-led car maker is expected to announce quarterly delivery and production figures in early April, providing an initial glimpse into how well the company's strategy of chasing volume over profit margins worked. Analyst survey by Bloomberg expect the Austin, Texas-based company to deliver a record 421,164 cars globally in the first quarter of 2023, up from 405,278 it delivered last quarter. Like the rest of the auto industry, the EV leader is grappling with inflation and high interest rates that make it more expensive for consumers to finance large purchases. Charlie?
Yeah, that's Bloomberg's Kimberly Adams. China has opened a cybersecurity review of imports from America's largest memory chip maker, Micron Technology, opening a new front in the escalating battle between the two countries over dominance in the semiconductor market. Micron shares down today by 4.4%. And those are some of the company stories we're following for you this hour. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Charlie Pella, thanks very much. Appreciate it. And let's get a check
You're
now on the
listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thanks, Mr. Announcer, man. Let's get a check now on the latest world and national news. We do that with Denise Pellegrini in the Bloomberg 1130 newsroom right here in New York. Happy Friday, Denise.
Happy Friday to you, but not a happy Friday downtown Manhattan, because Cyrus Vance Jr., former Manhattan DA, he's the one who preceded Alvin Bragg. Well, he tells us here at Bloomberg the Trump case is going to be like no other for the judge, and former President Trump expected to be arraigned in that Manhattan courtroom Tuesday, 2:15, on charges related to money paid to keep a relationship with porn actress Stormy Daniels' secret during his 2016 campaign, and CNN reporting 30 counts in the indictment. The sheer number, something Robert Mintz, former federal prosecutor, says signals possibly even deeper charges.
30 counts, if that reporting proves to be accurate, suggests that it involves something beyond the hush money payments that were connected to Stormy Daniels.
And security is already tight in lower Manhattan. President Biden asked by reporters about the Wall Street Journal reporter arrested in Russia on espionage charges.
To Russia as they're detaining this Wall Street Journal reporter.
Let him go.
And Biden commenting while going to Mississippi. And fewer electric vehicles will be in line for tax credits. More on that from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager.
The agency says the Inflation Reduction Act will leave just a few EV models eligible for up to $7,500 in credits as of April 18th. That's because most EV makers still won't be sourcing battery components or minerals from North America or U.S. free trade partners by then. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin put out a statement following this guidance. He says it completely ignores the intent of the climate spending law to encourage domestic EV investment. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
And Taylor Swift fans are apparently willing to travel if that's what it takes to get a hold of tickets. They'll buy tickets anywhere and basically set up their living rooms so they can get to these places, travel across the country to see their favorite musician. Global News 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Denise Pellegrini. This is Bloomberg. Jess and John, how far are you willing to go to see Taylor Swift?
We've been working for 30 years together. You forgot my name.
So March is women's. March.
You're done, Denise.
March is Women's History Month, and every day this month we are celebrating significant moments in women's history. Now, with your installment for Friday, March 31st, here is Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo.
On this day in women's history in 1888, the National Council of Women of the United States was established by its first official officers, Susan B. Anthony and Frances E. Willard. The council was inclusive from the start and embraced women's organizations from different backgrounds to help promote equality. It was founded along with the International Council for Women at a conference called by the National Women's Suffrage Association in Washington, D.C. Today, the council continues to have a membership of affiliate organizations and non-governmental organizations. It holds consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council and the UN Department of Information. That's Today in Women's History. I'm Lisa Mateo, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thanks, Lisa. I'm John Tucker, along with Jess Menton. And you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, right here on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg 1130 in New York, and all these other stations across the nation that I bet you didn't even know we had, did you, Jess?
I know I knew that.
Okay.
I was aware.
What are you looking at as we wrap up the quarter, wrap up this Friday trading week?
It's been a wild quarter, but I think what I liked most is what happened was what people weren't expecting. And so now it sort of sets the stage for the second quarter, right? Because we'll have the jobs report next Friday. It'll come out on Good Friday.
Yeah, we have to look at earnings too, because at the end of the day,